Warrior Lore. Chapter 27:19. As Du Xiaofu spoke, he took a step forward. It was a light step, but it created a huge black hole in the void. Cracks spread out around the black hole like a spider web. His aura rose crazily, like the waves of the sea. The turbid waves rose into the sky, and the battle formation was terrifying. Many people in the distance with insufficient cultivation were intimidated by such an aura, and they retreated in alarm. They were extremely terrified. The purplish-gold light pierced through the void, making Du Xiaofu look like a purplish-gold sun, dazzling and glaring. Facing Dai Xuanjin's extremely hateful eyes, Du Xiaofu did not back down and stared back at him. "Kid, are you the one who destroyed my second brother's cultivation?" Dai Xuanjin did not dodge, and his eyes were filled with hatred. He stared at Du Xiaofu sharply and asked. At this moment, he could not suppress his anger, and it went straight to his head. Within the boundaries of the Yuqing Divine Kingdom, no one dared to look down on the great Void General's estate. But this young kid in front of him actually destroyed his second brother's cultivation in the chaotic element space, and destroyed hundreds of years of cultivation in a day. If this happened outside, the older generation experts of the great Void General's estate would have already killed this kid. This was not only a matter of an outstanding junior's future being destroyed, but it also involved the face of the Dai family. No matter what, Dai Xuanjin had to end all his grievances here and kill this kid to vent his hatred. At the same time, he could also save some face for the Divine General's estate. "You're talking about a kid called Dai Xinming, right?" Du Xiaofu was expressionless. He curled his lips and said, "He dared to provoke my people. I'm already being merciful by not taking his life. Why, if you want to avenge him, you're welcome to fight." When Du Xiaofu spoke, there was an unconcealable contempt, as if Dai Xuanjin was not enough for him to take seriously. What an arrogant brat! Dai Xuanjin heard the disdain in the other party's words and immediately became furious. He shouted fiercely, "I was thinking about where I could find you. But now, since you jumped out of your own accord, you'll pay the price for your actions here." He pointed his finger at Du Xiaofu and said sternly. At the same time, expanse after expanse of hazy light surged out from Dai Xuanjin's body. It was like a river that effused out in a vast and mighty manner, and its fluctuations seethed as it charged swiftly towards the surroundings. Then, the surrounding air seemed to have suddenly turned cold. The temperature suddenly dropped, and goose feather-like snow rustled down, and the cold wind whistled and danced. Cold air pierced through the air, filling every inch of space. Even though the hundreds of people present had extraordinary cultivations, they still felt cold all over their bodies and could not help but shiver. Woo-woo! The bone-chilling wind was like a knife, cutting everyone's faces painfully. Then, Dai Xuanjin slowly stepped out, moving forward in the wind and snow toward Du Xiaofu's direction. As he took his first step, an endless amount of icy power rapidly condensed in the void, adhering to the soles of his feet, forming imprints made of ice and snow. They froze and cracked the space, making cracking sounds. "I advise you to retreat now and let us leave. Otherwise, the next time I make a move, I will absolutely not show any mercy." Seeing Dai Xuanjin approaching step by step, Du Xiaofu could not help but speak softly to him. He was not afraid of the great Void Divine General's residence, or rather, the people from the 4 Divine Generals' residences who had joined forces here. Even if all these people were added together, only Dai Xuanjin's cultivation could compete with him. The rest were just a motley crew. Du Xiaofu was confident enough to retreat easily. However, he did not plan to leave just like that. Nor did he think that Dai Xuanjin would really let him go just because of his words. After all, there was a deep-seated hatred between the two of them. However, what Du Xiaofu did not expect was that just as he finished speaking, Dai Xuanjin, who was walking in the endless wind and snow in the void, actually stopped in his tracks and fell into silence. Not to mention Du Xiaofu, even the people from the 4 Divine Generals' residences did not understand what was going on. After a long while, Dai Xuanjin finally raised his eyes, as if he had carefully weighed the pros and cons. He looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "Kid, you crippled my second brother, so I should tear you into pieces. However, I have an important matter to attend to today, so I can let you retreat now and let you live for a few more days. Now, as long as you hand over Hijibai, no one will stop you from leaving. However, the grudge between you and the Great Void Divine General's residence will have to be settled sooner or later. He stared at Du Xiaofu and said word by word. It could be heard that when he spoke, he seemed to be in a state of gnashing his teeth. It was obvious that he did not want to let him go just like that. After Dai Xuanjin's words, it immediately caused a huge uproar among the people who were watching from afar. How could it be? Why would young Master Dai let that kid go? There are so many of us here. If that kid dares to fight back, we have a good chance of keeping him here. Does this person have some background that even young Master Dai is a little afraid of? Big brother, kill him and avenge second brother. The people from the 4 divine generals' residences were all talking about it. They were very confused, and even the 6th prince and the little princess in the crowd felt that it was strange. However, Dai Xuanjin waved his hand and stopped everyone from talking. His eyes were fixed on Du Xiaofu and did not move away. Since he said those words, he must have thought it through carefully and would definitely weigh the pros and cons. However, Du Xiaofu responded to Dai Xuanjin with a sneer. Haha. Du Xiaofu sneered and said, He Jibai is my friend. Today, I must take him away. If you don't want to let me go, you can try. His eyes quickly swept across the hundreds of people and then returned to Dai Xuanjin. This young man must have sensed that his cultivation was higher than his, so he was somewhat fearful. Perhaps in other places, the other party would not hesitate to fight him for the sake of tempering himself, or to avenge his second brother, or for other reasons. However, now, Dai Xuanjin had put down all his grudges and let his enemy leave just like that. It was very unreasonable. However, this concession was not enough to shake Du Xiaofu in the slightest. His words expressed his attitude. He Jibai was going to be saved today. Brother Du, thank you for stepping in for me. But this Dai Xuanjin is really a scary person. You'd better leave quickly. Don't die here because of me. If you meet my sister and the other princes and princesses in the origin space, you must tell them what happened here as soon as possible. Behind Du Xiaofu, He Jibai's expression was a little serious and anxious. He used his eyes to urge Du Xiaofu to leave quickly. Of course, he knew how scary Dai Xuanjin was. Although Du Xiaofu's strength was quite good, in He Jibai's heart, he did not think that he could really compete with the young master of the Great Void Divine General's estate. Moreover, there were people from the 4 Great Divine Generals' estate here. If Du Xiaofu got involved, it would be no different from sending him to his death. Don't worry, I know what to do. Du Xiaofu turned around and smiled at He Jibai. At this time, Du Xiaofu's good impression of He Jibai deepened. Brother Du, listen to me. Looking at Du Xiaofu's relaxed appearance, He Jibai became even more anxious. However, before he could finish his words, he was interrupted by Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu said, You heard it just now. Even if I leave here today, the grudge between me and the Great Void Divine General's estate will not be resolved. Sooner or later, they will still come for me. Rather than wait for my opponents to come for me, it's better to settle all the grudges here. I don't have any other problems. I just don't want to leave behind any grudges or leave any hidden dangers for myself. Usually, if there's a grudge, I'll take revenge on the spot. If there's a hidden danger, I'll have to deal with it immediately. Otherwise, I won't feel good. Good, good, good. As Du Xiaofu's voice fell, before He Jibai could say anything, Dai Xuanjin's voice rang out. He heard him say, Take revenge on the spot. If there's a hidden danger, you'll have to deal with it immediately. I've left you a way out today, but you don't know how to cherish it at all. If that's the case, then go to hell. Dai Xuanjin's figure rose into the air and pounced straight at Du Xiaofu. An earth-shattering roar came out of his mouth. Icebound 1,000 miles. Tisk tsk tsk. As soon as Dai Xuanjin said that, the surrounding temperature plummeted. All the ice and snow froze and fell from the sky in heaps. The surrounding space suddenly turned into a world of ice and snow, wrapped in silver. Huge spatial cracks spread in the void. The space was frozen into pieces by the power of frost, like an ancient mottled city wall, with bricks peeling off. What a terrifying power of frost. Retreat. The hundreds of experts who were originally standing very far away all retreated even further. They all retreated hundreds of miles away. He Jibai had been sent away by Du Xiaofu's spatial technique. He went to the sixth prince and the little princess's side and retreated with the others. As for Du Xiaofu himself, he stood in place and did not move, allowing the terrifying frost to wrap around his body. A flame rose from his body. The law of fire was circulating, releasing blazing heat to resist the attack of the frost. Is this the power of the complete law of water? Du Xiaofu's eyes moved. He also felt the terror of Dai Xuanzhen's technique. The terrifying power of frost seemed to be able to freeze everything. It turned everything between heaven and earth into the coldest thing, shattering upon contact. At this time, if Du Xiaofu only relied on his immortal Xin body to resist, he would find it very difficult. The power of frost that filled every corner of the void seemed to be able to tear everything apart. Kid, you'll have to pay for my second brother's revenge with your life. Dai Xuanzhen shouted. He faced Du Xiaofu directly and rushed toward him. As he moved forward, the power of the laws of water surged violently and began to rapidly converge from all directions towards the center. It gathered into a terrifying pressure, as if it wanted to crush Du Xiaofu into fine powder. A huge iceberg took shape and fell from the sky. It brazenly passed through the void and smashed toward Du Xiaofu's head. This iceberg was so huge that it caused the void to rumble, and the ground to tremble along with it. You want to take my life? You're far from capable of that. Du Xiaofu snorted coldly. As he used the laws of fire to resist the terrifying cold, he raised one of his hands high into the air. His 5 fingers were spread out, his palm facing the sky as he faced the iceberg that was descending from the sky. Then, he let out a muffled roar, God-binding grip. The moment he roared, the law of space suddenly moved. Countless strands of invisible law power immediately enveloped the iceberg. Then, he suddenly clenched his fingers. Boom! A terrifying explosion rang out, resounding through the heavens and earth. It caused the entire universe to tremble. The sky was shaking, and the earth was shaking. The huge explosion made everyone's eardrums go numb. In front of everyone's eyes, the huge iceberg above Du Xiaofu's head looked as if it had been crushed by an invisible hand. Large pieces of ice exploded and scattered in the void, drifting down. In an instant, Du Xiaofu and Dai Xuanzhen's figures were completely submerged. They were nowhere to be seen. However, there were no weaklings there. Just the power of their souls was enough to see through the situation between the two of them. At this moment, Du Xiaofu remained standing without moving. The blood-fire divine lotus within him revolved, releasing the power of the laws of fire. It melted all the ice and snow that drifted towards him, turning it into rain. It's actually one of the 4 primordial laws, the law of space. That's quite impressive. Dai Xuanzhen did not care that he was encased in ice at all. He seemed like he was taking a stroll in his own backyard as he moved through space, flying towards Du Xiaofu. When the ice and snow landed on him, it was like a swarm of bees returning to their hive. It all burrowed into Dai Xuanzhen's body and was completely absorbed. A huge sword of light formed in his hand. It was over 3 meters long and shone with a sharp luster. It seemed to be forged from the toughest material in the world. A while later, Dai Xuanzhen had already arrived before Du Xiaofu. He raised the sword of light and swung it down at the purple-robed young man. World lightning punishment. Kill. Du Xiaofu was not afraid at all. He did not even think before he shouted coldly. Boom! A huge bolt of lightning instantly appeared in the sky. It was even thicker than a mountain as it blasted towards Dai Xuanzhen. Du Xiaofu knew that it was extremely likely that Dai Xuanzhen had grasped the complete law of water. If he relied on the incomplete laws of space and fire to fight him, he would be at a disadvantage. Although the law of space was one of the 4 primordial laws, it was still quite far from being complete. He still lacked a lot of experience in using it. Du Xiaofu did not want to waste any time here. He only wanted to end the battle as soon as possible. The enemies he was facing right now were not only Dai Xuanzhen and the people from the 4 divine generals' estate. Most importantly, the formation here was too strange. There was no way back at all. Du Xiaofu speculated that it was very likely that this was set up by someone. Although it did not appear to be dangerous for the time being, it would be very troublesome for him to deal with if something unexpected happened. Therefore, only by dealing with the problem as soon as possible could he be in an invincible position. Rumble. A huge bolt of lightning flashed through the sky and struck rapidly. It descended in front of Daishuanjin in the blink of an eye. It's actually the law of lightning, a master of 2 laws. No, it's 3. Daishuanjin immediately felt a deep sense of fear when he saw this. Du Xiaofu had already used the law of space in front of him earlier. When the other party crippled his second brother's cultivation, the power he displayed was the law of fire. Thinking about it this way, this young man was really too terrifying. Perhaps in terms of cultivation alone, Daishuanjin knew that he was not inferior to the other party. However, with the power of laws of 3 different attributes, there was an obvious gap between them. For ordinary powerhouses, mastering a complete set of laws was already considered a powerhouse of a region. But now, the young man opposite him had grasped 3 laws. That was too terrifying. In terms of talent, even in the entire supreme Changrong heaven, he should be as rare as a phoenix's feather. It would be difficult to find such a young man even in the 36 Holy Lands, let alone the small Yuqing Divine Kingdom. At this moment, Daishuanjin's heart was beating rapidly. He was deeply aware of what kind of terrifying existence his third brother had provoked. If this person can be used by the Great Void Divine General's residence, then things in the origin space will become very simple. Unfortunately, he's already on the opposite side. If I keep him alive, it'll be a huge disaster, Daishuanjin thought to himself. At the same time, he waved his hand and swung it towards the sky. An incomparably resplendent sword aura surged from the ice-light sword in his hand. It was like a pillar that supported the heavens as it soared up into the sky and suddenly collided with the lightning that was striking down from above. Rumble. Both of them were extremely domineering, and when they collided, they immediately exploded with a terrifying power. The lightning and icy light pillars shattered at the same time and turned into runes that filled the sky. They fluctuated with a vast power that boiled in the space. A terrifying black hole appeared, like the Demon King's huge mouth. It emitted a terrifying black light that seemed to be able to devour everything. Chapter 2720. Translator. H2DH2 Mr. Du Xiaofu and Daishuanjin both retreated after the attack, flying into the distance to avoid the energy storm that filled the sky. The space trembled for a long time, shaking with a buzzing sound that made people feel dizzy. Dense lightning runes and ice runes jumped in the void, entangling with each other and consuming each other's energy. With one attack, the two of them were almost evenly matched. This scene caused the spectators to be dumbfounded. This kid is so strong. He can actually fight young Master Dai to a standstill. Where did this guy come from? He's so powerful. That guy's methods are too mystical. He seems to be even stronger than young Master Dai. Many people began to speak out and discuss among themselves. Some of the stronger people in the crowd could see that the purple-robed young man's methods were actually much stronger than Daishuanjin's. Daishuanzi, the 6th prince, and the little princess were also stunned. Especially Daishuanzi, who felt a chill rise from the bottom of his feet to his head. He had never thought that this guy's strength was actually not inferior to his big brother's. If that was the case, the other party had really been merciful when he didn't kill him in the valley earlier. He had wanted to take revenge, but he had caused his second brother to become a cripple. Thinking of this, Daishuanzi couldn't help but rejoice endlessly. He was glad that he was still standing here. Brother Du's strength has already reached such a level. Among everyone, the one who was the most shocked should be He Jibai. He had traveled with Du Xiaofu all the way, and in the entire origin space, he was the one who understood him the most and knew that he was very strong. However, He Jibai definitely didn't expect that Du Xiaofu could actually fight Daishuanjin head-on, and after careful observation, he could see that Du Xiaofu had the upper hand. He Jibai couldn't help but feel very surprised. With such strength, there shouldn't be anyone in the same generation in the entire Yuqing Divine Kingdom who could be a match for him. He was faintly looking forward to seeing Du Xiaofu directly kill Daishuanjin. As long as he died, the danger he, the sixth prince, and the little princess would be easily resolved. Kid, I can't let you live today. Dai Xuanjun retreated far away and looked coldly at Du Xiaofu as he spoke. After witnessing the other party's strength, he inadvertently developed a strong sense of fear towards the purple-robed young man. That guy was a true controller of 3 kinds of laws. Moreover, Dai Xuanjun could see that the other party's law of thunder had even reached the perfection realm. Although the other laws of space and the law of fire were still lacking, they were still extremely powerful. As for Dai Xuanjun himself, the most was the complete water law of water. In fact, every cultivators of the techniques could not only a single law's law. For example, almost everyone had the ability to travel through space, but this ability was built on the foundation of one's own law. It did not mean that everyone could use the powerful law of space. Most of the cultivators' techniques were still at the level of profound meaning. They were still far from the true power of the laws. However, Dai Xuanjun was able to tell that what Du Xiaofu used was an extremely profound method of laws. It wasn't something that ordinary profundities could compare to at all. Anyone can talk big, but you dare to talk big with your little strength? Aren't you afraid that people will laugh their heads off? Du Xiaofu snorted and retorted Dai Xuanjun's words. After fighting for a while, Du Xiaofu had indeed discovered how terrifying the gloomy young man was. In terms of cultivation level, the other party was not weaker than him. They were both at the peak of the seizing divinity realm and were only one step away from the severing truth realm. Du Xiaofu had not encountered such an opponent in a long time, and he wanted to use this opportunity to hone himself. Thinking of this, he moved again and charged directly at Dai Xuanjun. At the same time, he shouted, "Come and fight!" Du Xiaofu's aura was like a rainbow. Streaks of purplish gold light shot out, making him look like a scorching sun emitting purplish gold light as he moved in the void. As he moved forward, the heavenly palace of purple gold appeared in his hand. The broadsword flickered with a cold sharpness and emitted an incomparably domineering aura. The profound qi in Du Xiaofu's body circulated wildly and surged into the heavenly palace of purple gold. In an instant, the phantoms of the azure dragon, the white tiger, the vermilion bird, and the black tortoise appeared in the space. They coiled in the air and roared suddenly, their roars shaking the sky. Emptiness between heaven and earth. Du Xiaofu shouted and raised his sword into the sky. In an instant, a resplendent sword light was condensed and shot out. This sword light was incomparably vast. It was like a heavenly pillar that pierced the 9 heavens and descended to the 9 underworlds. Dazzling light shot out explosively, thousands of times brighter than the sun's light, suppressing everything in the space. At this moment, it was as if there was only this sword light left in the world. It stood alone in the world and was outstanding in the dust. Crack, crack, crack. The space directly let out a series of cracking sounds, as if it was about to be forcefully exploded and was about to be torn apart. Kill. Seeing Du Xiaofu attack again, Dai Xuanjun was also unwilling to fall behind. His body soared into the sky and arrived above the 9 heavens. At the same time, he crossed his arms in front of his chest. Unparalleled power quickly gathered and condensed in one place, forming a ball of light. Sparkling and translucent water attribute light flowed on it, fluctuating with a dazzling brilliance. Gurgle, gurgle. The sound of a clear spring flowing could be heard from the ball of light, and a series of bubbles appeared. Dai Xuanjun's arms stretched across the sky and pushed with all his might. The ball of light shook the sky and met Du Xiaofu's all-powerful sword without dodging. In the process of going against the sky, the ball of light condensed from the water attribute laws expanded in the wind and rapidly grew in size. In an instant, it became incomparably huge and shot straight into the sky. In the next instant, Du Xiaofu's sword light and the ball of light collided fiercely. Whoosh! The sword light was like a red-hot iron rod, carrying an unparalleled force as it brazenly slashed into the ball of water. Then, the entire water attribute ball of light was split open and then exploded. Clear water scattered all over the sky. The strange power contained in the water droplets pierced through the void, forming numerous black holes that filled the entire void. The most special thing about the water attribute power was that it could be both hard and soft. In the combination of hard and soft, it possessed unfathomable power. Under such circumstances, Du Xiaofu's sword was met with great resistance. The indomitable momentum on it was gradually reduced by the water attribute power, and then turned into nothing. When the incomparably thick sword light finally cut through the water barrier and reached Dai Xuanzhen's head, it also dissipated with a bang, turning into violent and domineering energy that swirled in the void. However, this energy was no longer enough to cause any harm to Dai Xuanzhen. Dai Xuanzhen stood proudly in the air, stepping on the void, and punched out again. Then, a huge dragon's roar was heard from his throat, echoing throughout the entire space. In the void, countless dense and boiling water attribute energy reformed once again, quickly condensing into an incomparably sturdy dragon. Its face was ferocious, and its mouth was wide open as it suddenly pounced at Du Xiaofu. On the dragon's body, huge tiles of scales were spread out like halberds. They flickered with a cold light, and it was extremely cold. Every inch of the dragon's body exuded unparalleled explosive power. As it rolled and twisted, it pressed down on the void until it rumbled. "Is that all you've got? You're getting more and more useless." Thunderclap. Du Xiaofu spoke softly, and his arm swung violently in the void. Then, there was a huge rumble, and the mountains and rivers trembled. Another thick bolt of lightning flashed in the air, and like ribbons, they fell from the sky and hung in the void, swiftly and violently striking the dragon. Boom, 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 boom. The thunder roared, and the rumbles were deafening. All of them landed on the body of the water attribute dragon, and every strike blasted a large piece of flesh and sent scales flying. Roar! The water attribute dragon seemed as if it had a life of its own, and it ceaselessly let out miserable howls in extreme pain. Under the boundless bombardment of lightning, the glow on its body became extremely dim step by step, and in the end, it exploded with a bang and disintegrated in the sky. At the same time, Dai Xuanzhen, who was connected to it, abruptly spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face instantly turned pale. The complete laws of lightning really is formidable. Dai Xuanzhen sighed in his heart, and he was slightly convinced by Du Xiaofu's strength. However, even though he was slightly shaken, he didn't suffer too heavy of an injury because of it. The gap between two people of similar cultivation wasn't particularly obvious, and Dai Xuanzhen knew that it wouldn't be so easy for Chun Shi to do anything to him. Hegemonic sword path. Right at this moment, Du Xiaofu's voice resounded once more, and it caused Dai Xuanzhen's eyes to suddenly narrow. Under his gaze, a pair of huge golden wings appeared on the back of the purple-robed young man, and they flapped repeatedly. After that, the violet-robed young man's figure instantly arrived before him. Doping Blitz. Just as Dai Xuanzhen reacted, Du Xiaofu had already raised his sword and attacked. An incomparably terrifying might fluctuated from the broadsword, and layers of runes flickered as it headed straight for Dai Xuanzhen's head. In a hurry, Dai Xuanzhen could only raise his fists and cross them in front of his chest to resist with all his might. Boom! The broadsword slashed down and directly struck Dai Xuanzhen's fist. His body was instantly sent flying by the enormous force, and he only stopped after flying for hundreds of miles. Patter! The back of his hand was a bloody mess, and drops of blood flowed down from the back of his hand and fell into the void. If he hadn't used the power of the laws of water at the last moment and wrapped it around his fist, Dai Xuanzhen's hands would probably have been crippled at this moment. Even so, he still suffered extreme injuries. In an unseen place, the bones in his hands were shattered, and the heart-wrenching pain caused Dai Xuanzhen's forehead to break out in cold sweat. In the process of Dai Xuanzhen flying backward, Du Xiaofu didn't pursue him. Instead, he also retreated rapidly and flew toward He Zhibai and the others. Don't resist. He arrived beside He Zhibai, the sixth prince, the little princess, and the others and transmitted his voice to them. At the same time, Du Xiaofu controlled the ancient desolate space to open a huge gap and quickly put dozens of figures into it. Then, he quickly flew into the distance at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, he was thousands of miles away. Why did he run away? When the people from the four divine generals' estate saw this, they were all stunned for a moment. They couldn't understand why the violet-robed young man suddenly retreated. He clearly had the upper hand, and even young Master Dai of the Great Void Divine General's estate was no match for him. If the battle continued, it was very likely that many of them would need to work together to have a chance of stopping him. But this fellow left just like that, leaving many people scratching their heads in confusion. What are you all standing there for? Chase him. A loud shout came from afar. It was Dai Xuanzhen's voice. When he saw that Du Xiaofu had escaped, he immediately flew back and ordered the others. Chase him. Although many people felt that it was strange, they didn't dare to go against young Master Dai's orders. They all moved in an instant and chased in the direction that the violet-robed young man had fled. More people are coming. They're probably coming for the sixth prince and the little princess. Du Xiaofu thought to himself as he flew away. In reality, he didn't want to retreat just like that, but he knew that even though he had many tricks up his sleeve, it definitely wouldn't be easy for him to really do anything to Dai Xuanzhen. Most importantly, he sensed with the power of his primordial spirit that many figures were rapidly converging on the battlefield. Among those people, there were also existences that were no weaker than him, and their auras were no weaker than Dai Xuanzhen's. The person leading the way for these people was a subordinate of the Great Void Divine General's estate. He had once been with Dai Ximing to surround Du Xiaofu in the valley where the bloody flame lotus was. It was obvious that these people were from the estate of the four divine generals. If he encountered them alone, Du Xiaofu would be willing to fight to determine who was better, but the safety of He Zhibai and the others really couldn't be guaranteed. Therefore, he weighed the pros and cons in his heart. He knew that it would be difficult for today's matter to come to a conclusion. In the face of hundreds of people besieging him, he could only take He Zhibai away first and slowly make plans later. You're here. On the other side, Dai Xuanzhen watched hundreds of people chase after Du Xiaofu in a grandiose manner, but he himself stayed in the air above the battlefield. He looked in a certain direction, where dozens of figures were flying towards him. They quickly arrived in front of him. Young Master Dai, has the trouble here been dealt with? Among the people, there was an extremely burly man. He glanced at Dai Xuanzhen and asked. The burly man's upper body was bare. His bronze skin rippled and flowed with arcs of power. Veins could be faintly seen on his skin. It was obvious that he contained extremely terrifying power. No, they escaped. Dai Xuanzhen clenched his fist and said hatefully. His gaze was abnormally gloomy. What's going on? Although Yu Chengliang and Yu Chengyu's cultivation isn't weak, how could they escape in front of so many of you? The burly man raised his eyebrows and said with some displeasure, something happened. A guy in a purple robe, who seems to be related to the Divine General Zihang estate, rescued them. I've already sent people to chase after them. It seems that they can't escape from the Divine Barren Heavenlock formation even if they have wings. Dai Xuanzhen replied. His gaze pierced through the void and seemed to be able to see the trajectory of Du Xiaofu's escape as he said viciously. He didn't hide anything and directly told the burly man everything that had happened. He also explained the grudge between Du Xiaofu and the Divine General's estate. Don't talk about those useless things. You should know our mission here. Originally, we thought that those two people would be easily dealt with, but they were able to easily escape from the encirclement of so many of you. I only hope that nothing unexpected happens later. Otherwise, the two of us and the Divine General's estate behind us won't be able to bear this responsibility, the burly man said coldly. His words carried a hint of warning. He was very dissatisfied and was extremely angry that Dai Xuanzhen had lost his target. I don't need you to remind me. I know what to do. Now, let's chase after them and take a look. That purple-robed youth isn't weak. I'm afraid that we'll need to join forces to have a chance of successfully taking him down. Dai Xuanzhen snorted softly and glanced at the burly man as he said, There's no harm in making a move. I'd like to see where the kid you're talking about came from. He's actually so powerful. The burly man's eyes were like a pair of copper bells. As he looked around coldly, he emitted an indescribable ferocity that made one's scalp tingle. He paused for a moment and then said, If we 7 Divine Generals estate can't even do such a small thing in this origin space, then we'll definitely become the laughing stock of the world. None of the princes and princesses who entered here will be able to walk out of here alive. As the burly man spoke, his tone became colder and colder. The origin space has just opened, and there's still nearly 20 years. We can take it slow and don't be too hasty. Actually, according to my original plan, we'll wait for the few of us to break through to the true severing realm before making a move. At that time, it'll be much easier, Daishuanjin said. He gently turned around and ignored the burly man and the others. He took the lead and flew into the distance, chasing after Du Xiaofu. Don't think that you're the only one who's smart. If we can break through, they will also have the chance to break through to the true severing realm. When the time comes to fight, the losses will be even greater. When we leave the origin space, the situation in the outside world will only begin. Therefore, the result here is very important. We can't be careless at all. Behind Dai Xuanjin, the burly man and the others followed closely and walked side by side with him. Let's find that little bastard first. In this divine, desolate heaven-lock formation, he can't escape. He dared to injure my third brother, cripple my second brother, and get involved in our plan. No matter what the reason is, I must make him regret being born into this world. Chapter 27-21. Let's find that little bastard first. He can't escape from this divine, wasteland heaven-lock formation. He dared to injure my third brother, cripple my second brother, and get involved in our plan. No matter what the reason is, I must make him regret coming to this world. Dai Xuanjin said coldly, his face incomparably gloomy. This divine wasteland heaven-lock formation is in our hands, and it can block the spying of experts from the outside world. It's a pity that we're not strong enough. Otherwise, if we could activate a greater power, killing those people would be as easy as flipping our palms. The bare-chested man said in a droning voice, his eyes filled with boundless killing intent. The group continued their pursuit in the direction where Du Xiaofu had disappeared. At this moment, Du Xiaofu could be said to have encountered unprecedented trouble. Originally, with his speed, if he used the extreme speed of the golden-winged Great Rock Clan, it would be easy to shake off the pursuers. However, now that he was in the array, he could only move forward and could not turn back. Du Xiaofu discovered that the array covered a huge circular area, and at the center was the deepest area. If he plunged head first into that area, he would fall into an extremely difficult situation. No matter which direction he went, he would not be able to walk out of that small area. He could only be like a trapped mouse, caught like a turtle in a jar. Therefore, Du Xiaofu could only walk around the center to avoid going too deep into it. As a result, it would be very difficult for him to shake off the pursuers behind him. As long as the other party sent a group of people to guard a certain place, he would be blocked off sooner or later. Du Xiaofu had already tried to use the spatial laws or the lightning laws to break this array, but it was all to no avail. At this moment, he still felt that it was very troublesome. With no other choice, Du Xiaofu released He Jibai, the sixth prince, and the little princess from the ancient desolate space. Brother Du. He Jibai quickly increased his speed and walked side by side with Du Xiaofu. Thank you for saving me, brother. I, Yu Chengliang, am eternally grateful. The sixth prince and the little princess also cupped their fists towards Du Xiaofu to express their gratitude. Sixth prince, little princess, you two enter this place first. Do you know what kind of talisman array this is? Du Xiaofu did not exchange pleasantries with the three and directly asked. Yu Chengliang and Yu Chengyu shook their heads and said, we don't know what formation this is either, but once we barged in, we were unable to find a way back. We could only continue to head deeper and deeper. Otherwise, the people from Divine General Yuan Ding's mansion, Divine General Xian Huang's mansion, and Divine General Nie Huang's mansion wouldn't have been able to trap us. The two of them were the sixth prince and the little princess of the Yu Qing divine nation, so they were extremely respected. However, they still treated Du Xiaofu very politely. The reason for this was not only because Du Xiaofu had saved them, but also because they had all witnessed the strength of this purple-robed young man. There was no one who wouldn't lower their attitude towards the strong. Brother Du, could it be that even you didn't discover the mystery behind this and find a way to break it? He Jibai frowned and asked. Du Xiaofu smiled bitterly. He had already tried, but there was no way that would work. In fact, the anxiety in his heart was no less than that of the three people beside him. He had come to the 33 heavens, but he had already fallen into such a situation before he had even started his adventure. In the outside world, the whereabouts of the tomboy, the little Qilin, and the others were still unknown. He hoped that nothing had happened to them. Sixth Prince, little princess, I wonder what the four divine generals' manners are planning by joining forces? He Jibai turned around and looked behind him. With Du Xiaofu's help, no one was chasing after them, so they were temporarily safe. We don't know either, but what we can see is that they have been planning this for a long time in secret. The sixth prince smiled bitterly and shook his head helplessly. After he and his sister entered the origin space, they had acted together. But no one had expected that they would be blocked by Qi Weicheng, Qi Weidun, Zhong Su, Wang Qishuan, and the others. In the end, they had fallen into a large formation. If He Jibai and Du Xiaofu hadn't barged in one after another, with Dai Xuanzhen's help, they would have most likely died or been captured. I'm afraid it's not just the four divine generals' manners who have joined forces. At this moment, Du Xiaofu suddenly said such a sentence. What? He Jibai, Yu Chengliang, and Yu Chengyu were all stunned and looked at him with questioning eyes. Du Xiaofu didn't hide anything and directly told the three of them about the situation he had sensed before leaving. The three young experts frowned. As for the shirtless man, he naturally didn't escape the prying of the power of his primordial spirit. After a few exchanges, they realized that the current situation was not optimistic. The man that Brother Du mentioned is called Helian Shang, a disciple of divine General Yin He's mansion. He Jibai let out a long sigh and said with emotion. It was now confirmed that 5 of the 10 divine generals' mansions of the Yuqing divine kingdom had joined forces with the intention of killing the 6th prince and the little princess in the origin space. Their conspiracy was far more than that. The most important thing now is to find the other royal brothers and sisters, as well as Sister Jixin. Finally, we can determine how many divine generals' mansions have joined forces. Only by knowing our opponents can we make preparations to deal with them. The little princess Yu Chengyu pursed her red lips and said, That's right. The news here must be spread as quickly as possible. Not only have the divine generals' mansions joined forces, but there are also many other forces involved. Their conspiracy must not be allowed to succeed. Yu Chengliang also clenched his fist and said with incomparable seriousness, If what happened in the origin space was only the first step of the divine generals' mansions plan, then they must have more to do next. If they could meet up with the other princes and princesses and join forces with the divine general Zi Hong's mansion, they would have a chance to fight. In addition, if they could leave the origin space in advance and let the upper echelons of the Yuqing divine kingdom know about this, then the result would definitely be different. Let's think of a way to break the array here first. Du Xiaofu spread his hands helplessly. He did not want to get involved in the muddy waters of the Yuqing divine kingdom. However, now that he was involved, he was like a grasshopper on a rope with the 3 young people beside him. Only by advancing and retreating together would they have a better way out. He felt that something must have happened in the Yuqing divine kingdom. Otherwise, why would the divine general's mansions suddenly carry out such a rebellious act? It did not make sense. However, he did not say this conjecture out loud. Just by looking at He Jibai, Yu Chengliang, and Yu Chengyu's expressions, one could tell that they did not understand the situation and were all very confused. Du Xiaofu didn't say anything else as he quickly led the 3 of them forward. With his speed, he did not have to worry about the people from the divine general's mansions catching up with them. However, if they were to go around in circles together, it would not solve the problem. Come in. Du Xiaofu opened the origin space again and encircled the 3 of them. He then followed them in. Yu Chengliang, Yu Chengyu, and He Jibai had already seen the situation here, but they were still very shocked when they came in for the second time. Brother Du, what is this place? Why do I feel that it is very different from a normal origin space? He Jibai looked around and asked in surprise. The 6th prince, the little princess, and many of their subordinates who had been in this space were staring motionlessly at the flaming skeleton sitting not far away. Everyone had a look of fear in their eyes. It's very safe here. Let's hide here for a while before we find a way to break through the formation outside. With my strength, Even if Daishuanjin and Helian Shang join forces, they may not be able to protect you all, Du Xiaofu said. Then, he no longer cared about them and directly sealed the exit of the origin space, turning it into an independent space. He thought for a moment and explained to He Jibai and the others, time passes much faster here than in the outside world. Make the best use of your time to cultivate and improve your strength. Even if we can't break the talisman formation outside, we'll still have the strength to fight with them when we get out. After Du Xiaofu finished speaking, the dozens of people were all shocked. They had seen origin space before, but the power of space and time were mixed together to form an independent world. This kind of method was very difficult for ordinary people to see. They did not know if this purple-robed young man really came from a small world like he said. This was really something that was hard to imagine. Du Xiaofu didn't care about their shocked expressions. Minding his own business, he flew into the ancient desolate space and rushed to a corner. There, a ball of light was flickering, enveloping a human figure that emitted a mysterious aura. Are you really the principal of Tianwu Academy? Why haven't you woken up after so long? Du Xiaofu looked at the glowing human figure. The figure's face was completely covered by the flowing light, making it impossible to see clearly. Vaguely, he could tell that the figure belonged to a man from the sturdy figure. Back in the divine martial world, Du Xiaofu, the demon god, and the others had entered a space without any suppression, and their cultivation had increased tremendously. After the space shattered, the person enveloped in light appeared. Clearly, his existence had an inseparable relationship with that space. However, even after so long, Du Xiaofu still did not see the person waking up. Even now, he still didn't know if the other party was the principal of Tianwu Academy. Back then, after the calamity of the devil religion, Du Xiaofu tried to awaken the other party after he reconstructed his body and soul, but to no avail. He could only allow the other party to lie in the origin space and observe the changes in the future. The founder of Tianwu Academy left behind this origin space. If that's the case, you shouldn't be a native of the divine martial world. Du Xiaofu muttered to himself as he tried to guess some things. The means of the creator of this origin space could definitely be described as heaven-defying. Du Xiaofu had already reached the pinnacle of the seizing divinity realm and was only a step away from the severing truth realm. However, he didn't have the means to create something similar to the origin space. Thus, his guess wasn't without reason. It was very likely that the principal of Tianwu Academy came from the 33 skies. Hee, brat, are you in trouble? Just as Du Xiaofu was deep in thought, a voice suddenly sounded in his ears. Old man, why are you gloating over my misfortune? Du Xiaofu glared at the other party and scolded back. Soon after, he soared into the air and flew to the flaming skeleton's side, glaring fiercely at it. Du Xiaofu wasn't the least bit courteous to this fellow. Impudent brat, are you looking for a beating? The flaming skeleton looked at Du Xiaofu with its empty eye sockets. Its jaw opened and closed, and the sound of wind could be heard coming from its mouth. It seemed to be angry. At this moment, the aura of the flaming skeleton was much better than before, but it was still very weak. The battle with the blood-flame divine lotus in the lava space had consumed too much of its energy. It was hard for it to recover in a short period of time. Beat me up? Hee. This time, it was Du Xiaofu who started to laugh instead. A wide smile hung on his face. He walked step by step toward the flaming skeleton and sneered, Old man, why don't you take a look at whose territory this is? Even if I tell you, this is my desolate ancient space. In here, all laws and order are dictated by me. No matter who comes in, if you're a dragon, you have to coil up, and if you're a tiger, you have to lie down. Under such circumstances, you still dare to threaten me? As Du Xiaofu spoke, he raised his leg and kicked the flaming skeleton's butt, causing it to stagger. Damn! The flaming skeleton cursed. It was like a rolling gourd, rolling on the ground a few times. It was indescribably wretched. At this moment, its heart was on the verge of collapse. When Du Xiaofu kicked out, he clearly felt that there was a strange power that completely restrained his body, making him unable to move at all. It was as if the laws and order here could be used by the purple-robed youth to deal with it. Thinking about it, It was a powerhouse that had made its name countless years ago. Yet today, it had been kicked in the butt by a little fellow. It had lost all its face. Fortunately, the flaming skeleton no longer had any flesh or blood. Otherwise, its face would have turned purple and its expression would have been very interesting. "Stinking brat, you really attacked." The flaming skeleton got up and stood in front of Du Xiaofu. It looked at him cautiously, afraid that the other party would kick it again. "Old man, hand over the blood flame divine lotus's main body." Du Xiaofu didn't move as he stared straight at the flaming skeleton. "In your dreams." The flaming skeleton spat and wanted nothing more than to jump up and slap this brat to death. "This old man helped you refine the blood flame divine lotus true spirit, but not only are you not grateful, you even have designs on me. Do you even have a shred of conscience?" The flaming skeleton was incomparably angry. This brat had gone too far. If it weren't for its help back then, let alone refining the blood flame divine lotus true spirit, this brat wouldn't even have been able to keep his life. Now, this brat was relying on the fact that they were in its territory and wanted to seize the blood flame divine lotus true body. The flames on the skull's head burned even more vigorously, burning brightly. Wisps of green smoke kept coming out of its nostrils. "Don't give me that useless crap. If you're not convinced, I don't mind taking it myself. At that time, I won't be so polite." Du Xiaofu rolled his eyes at the flaming skeleton and stepped forward again. Step by step, he walked towards the flaming skeleton. The flaming skeleton was so frightened that it hurriedly retreated, pulling away from Du Xiaofu. However, in this desolate space, everything was under Du Xiaofu's control. With its heavily injured body, how could it escape his pursuit? "Wait." Seeing Du Xiaofu get closer and closer, the flaming skeleton immediately shouted and hurriedly said, "Brat, if you acknowledge me as your master, I can teach you a lot of skills. In terms of the laws of space and the laws of fire, my grasp of them is deeper than yours. Acknowledge me as your master, and this old man will pass down everything I've learned in my life to you. Let's not talk about these useless things. I'm not afraid to tell you one more thing. With my methods, it's not difficult to obtain all of your memories. At that time, I'll be able to read all of your comprehensions. Wouldn't it be much more useful than you teaching me?" Du Xiaofu sneered. He didn't believe the temptation of the flaming skeleton, and he still pressed forward step by step, causing the flaming skeleton to ceaselessly retreat. In next to no time, the flaming skeleton had retreated to the end of the primordial space. "Brat, you." The flaming skeleton was speechless. It was so angry that the roots of its teeth itched, but it was powerless to refute him. "You what? Hand it over obediently, or else you'll have to suffer physical pain." "Oh, right, you don't even have a physical body now." Du Xiaofu walked forward. With a light wave of his hand, a purple-gold palm of light appeared and grabbed at the flaming skeleton with the intention of grabbing it. However, just as the palm of light descended, Du Xiaofu let out a soft cry of surprise. He felt as if his palm of light had suddenly fallen into a quagmire, and it directly stopped in front of the flaming skeleton. It was unable to advance any further and was firmly confined there. This scene caused Du Xiaofu's brows to raise abruptly. "Brat, let's talk some more. If you have any conditions, feel free to state them. As long as this old man is able to do it, I definitely won't refuse you. However, I really can't give you the main body of the Bloodfire Divine Lotus. Otherwise, with this old man's current state, I'll directly lose my life." The flaming skeleton was truly anxious this time. It spoke loudly again, wanting to do its best to dispel Du Xiaofu's idea of seizing the main body of the Bloodfire Divine Lotus. In this space, it really couldn't do anything to this damned brat. Chapter 27-22. Translator. H2DH2, Mr. the Flaming Skeleton had spent tens of thousands of years in that lava space and only managed to refine the main body of the Bloodfire Divine Lotus. After fighting with the Bloodfire Divine Lotus true spirit for so long, it had long been exhausted to the extreme. If it handed over the main body of the Bloodfire Divine Lotus at this time, its old life really would not be able to continue. At this critical juncture of life and death, it had to do its best to persuade him. Look at how scared you are, old thing. As the flaming skeleton's empty eyes stared at Du Xiaofu, seemingly containing an indescribable eagerness, Du Xiaofu suddenly waved the palm of light away and curled the corners of his lips, saying, "That's right." Hearing this, the flaming skeleton froze on the spot. It was neither rejoicing nor cursing. At this moment, it really only wanted to recover its peak strength and smack this damned brat's ass into pieces. It had been many years since it had made a name for itself, but it seemed that no one had ever dared to make fun of it like this. "Brat, what do you want?" The flaming skeleton used its non-existent eyes to glare viciously at Du Xiaofu as it spoke through clenched teeth. "If I wanted to kill you, these old bones of yours would have died long ago. How would you have had the chance to last until now?" Du Xiaofu rolled his eyes as he spoke slowly, like a benevolent bodhisattva, showing great kindness to the flaming skeleton. "Brat, do you think this old man is so easy to fool? If you have something to say, just say it. Don't try to coax this old man like I'm a child." What kind of person was the flaming skeleton? He was an expert of the older generation who had experienced the baptism of countless years. His knowledge and experience were countless times broader than Du Xiaofu's. How could he be so easily coaxed? At this point, it was simply impossible for him to believe that this brat would be so kind. This was definitely a cunning little fox. Even if he pulled out a single eyelash, it would all be empty. Don't be fooled by what he said. In reality, he was definitely hatching some sort of scheme. Who knew how many evil tricks were churning in his stomach? At this thought, the flaming skeleton became even more cautious. It stared motionlessly at Du Xiaofu, wanting to see what he would say next. "Hee, Senior," Du Xiaofu chuckled, shook his robe, and walked towards the flaming skeleton. Most importantly, he had changed the way he addressed him from old man and old thing to senior. However, it was these two words that couldn't be any more ordinary that made the flaming skeleton's hair stand on end. "This space is called the Desolate Ancient Space and is under my control. I don't dare to say that it's too exaggerated, but here, even if an immortal realm expert comes, he won't be able to escape from my grasp. He can only be trampled on by me." Du Xiaofu smiled strangely and said to the flaming skeleton slowly, "But senior, what technique did you use just now? It actually affected my control over space. Even though I didn't use my full strength, it still doesn't make sense." As soon as Du Xiaofu finished his words, the flaming skeleton instantly understood that this brat's original attitude had a 180-degree change. So this was what he wanted to know. "Stinking brat, I've finally caught your weakness." The flaming skeleton immediately felt extremely carefree. It could not help but think proudly that this extraordinary little fellow was also attracted by its unfathomable technique. However, it did not directly say that out loud. Instead, it said, "Brat, I've already said that as long as you're willing to acknowledge me as your master, not to mention that little technique just now, I can even impart everything I've learned in my life to." He had long seen that this purple-robed young man was extraordinary. Although he was a little cunning, his talent was really outstanding. It would be a good result if he could take him under his wing. However, before the flaming skeleton could finish speaking, Du Xiaofu's face changed again. "Stop." Du Xiaofu waved his hand and directly cut off the flaming skeleton's last words. He said, "Don't say such useless things. It's not that easy to make me acknowledge you as my master." The corners of Du Xiaofu's mouth twitched as he said unhurriedly, "What if you're just for show? And it won't be long before your cultivation is surpassed by mine. Then what's the use of having such a master? In addition, I don't know anything about you. If you're an evil person who's hated by everyone in the 33 realms, then when I become your disciple, wouldn't there be people chasing after me every day to kill me? I'm still young, and I don't want to live that kind of life." Du Xiaofu spoke very seriously, but as the flaming skeleton listened, green smoke unconsciously came out of its eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. It looked like an incense burner. What did he mean by a good-for-nothing? What did he mean by a great villain? At this moment, the flaming skeleton really wanted to strangle Du Xiaofu to death. This treacherous young man in front of it was really really too outrageous. You can do whatever you want. This old man won't teach you anymore. Even if I die, I won't take you in as my disciple." The flaming skeleton's stubborn temper flared up, and it roared hatefully. Then, it suddenly turned its head, leaving Du Xiaofu with the back of its head covered in flames. As it spoke, wisps of smoke floated out of its 7 orifices, enshrouding the void. Hey, senior. We can talk about the conditions." Seeing that the other party was quite angry, Du Xiaofu laughed even more happily. He eagerly rushed forward and turned to the front of the flaming skeleton. In fact, when he saw the flaming skeleton's methods in the lava space, Du Xiaofu had already started to be very interested in this old fellow, and the light palm he threw out just now seemed to have sunk into a quagmire, which made Du Xiaofu feel that it was very mysterious. He also wanted to take a look at this kind of usage of spatial laws. However, if he were to acknowledge Zhang Xian as his teacher just like that, he would not allow others to take advantage of him for nothing. In any case, this flaming skeleton was in the ancient, desolate space, so he wasn't afraid of it escaping. However, Du Xiaofu really didn't want to kill this old fellow. Firstly, he wanted to obtain the other party's comprehension of the various laws. Secondly, there really wasn't any enmity between the two of them that couldn't be resolved. Thirdly, although Du Xiaofu had the spirit-searching technique, it probably wouldn't have much of an effect on this powerhouse whose cultivation he didn't know. If the spirit-searching technique didn't succeed, then the losses would be great. We have nothing to talk about. If you want to obtain comprehension of laws from me, then from now on, give up. The flaming skeleton was clearly angered to the extreme. It no longer wanted to pay attention to Du Xiaofu and turned its head away, not meeting his eyes. "Senior, look at your current appearance. You should also need to reconstruct your body. Junior is more than happy to help you find the precious medicines you need. I only hope that one day, Senior's mortal body can shine with vitality and restore your former cultivation so that you can stand at the peak of the 33 heavens once more. In exchange, you only need to tell me some of your comprehensions. Junior has always been a man of his word and never deceives old or young. And for Senior, this is a transaction that will only benefit you, so why not?" Du Xiaofu's tongue was as bright as a lotus flower. His words were extravagant, his spittle flying everywhere. Even the flaming skeleton was moved by his words. The flaming skeleton fixed its eyes on him, not speaking for a long time. After a long time, it squeezed out a single word, "shameless." The skeletal old man stretched out a withered hand and rubbed his forehead, feeling a bit of a headache. How did he end up encountering such a fellow? This was simply too infuriating. He turned around and left, and he headed towards a corner of the desolate dimension. He didn't want to continue being entangled with this shameless kid, so he ran as far away as he could. However, it was impossible for Du Xiaofu to let him off just like that. He called out, "Senior, Senior." After that, he chased after the skeletal old man once more and started persuading him with all his might. Not too far away, He Jibai, Yu Chengliang, Yu Chengyu, and the others witnessed all of this, and all of them had dumbstruck expressions on their faces. They'd noticed the existence of the flaming skeleton when they first entered this space. However, these people weren't weak, so they were naturally able to sense the terrifying aura that was naturally emanated from the flaming skeleton. They didn't dare go forward and offend the flaming skeleton, and they just watched silently from the side for a while. All of them heaved sighs of relief when they saw the flaming skeleton paid no attention to them. After that, after Du Xiaofu entered the desolate dimension with them, he launched a fierce pursuit towards the flaming skeleton. Moreover, there were extremely deep tricks hidden at every corner of the desolate dimension, and it caused all the young experts to widen their horizons. All of them had witnessed how Du Xiaofu was an absolute top existence in the younger generation, and he was much more formidable than all of them. However, at this moment, when they saw such a shameless scene, all of them couldn't help but sigh with emotion in their hearts. You really can't judge a book by its cover. He Jibai opened his mouth with the intention of saying something, but in the end, he swallowed all his words. After that, He exchanged glances with Yu Chengliang and Yu Chengyu before falling into silence, and then all of them sat cross-legged on the ground and started cultivating. During the fierce battle from before, all of them had suffered some injuries, and the vital energy within their bodies had been exhausted quite a bit. At this moment, they'd temporarily escaped the joint assault of the Divine General's estate, and they just needed to recover properly. In next to no time, the desolate dimension became slightly quiet, and only Du Xiaofu's voice resounded incessantly from nearby as he continued arguing with the flaming skeleton. Time slowly passed, and in the blink of an eye, 2 days had passed. Outside the desolate dimension, a large area of the surrounding area was enveloped by an enormous formation. This formation was called the Divine Desolate Heavenlock Formation. At this moment, the members of the Divine General's estate, 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 and the Divine General's estate were intensely searching for traces of Du Xiaofu. However, to their disappointment, even after so much time had passed, they still hadn't seen the figure of the purple-robed young man. It was as if he had vanished from this space, leaving no trace behind. Why did that little bastard suddenly disappear without a trace? This doesn't make sense, Dai Xuanzhen said somewhat irritably. Behind him was his third brother, Dai Xuanzi, the Divine General's estate's Zhong Su, and the Divine General's estate's Wang Qishuan, as well as a few other subordinates. Young Master Dai, we've already searched for so long. Could that kid have already escaped the range of the Divine Desolate Heavenlock Formation? Zhong Su also seemed somewhat impatient as he asked anxiously, Impossible. This Divine Desolate Heavenlock Formation can isolate the detection of an immortal realm expert. If it was set up by that kind of expert, it can even trap an immortal realm expert. No matter how strong that kid is, he's just a seizing god realm expert. How could he escape so easily? Dai Xuanzhen said, but 2 days have already passed. We've already searched many places, but we still haven't seen a trace of that kid. This is too strange. Wang Qishuan also said with disbelief. Everyone present understood the power of the Divine Desolate Heavenlock Formation. Therefore, they felt somewhat depressed that Du Xiaofu had been able to escape from their pursuit for so long. No one knew where the problem was. Inform Helian Shang to search further. Keep searching towards the depths of the formation. Even if we have to dig 3 feet into the ground, we have to find that damn kid. Dai Xuanzhen clenched his fist and suddenly smashed it in the void. Immediately, a huge black hole appeared. Understood. Behind him, some of his subordinates immediately left the team and left. Young Master Dai, when that kid escaped, he once put He Jibai and the others into a space. At this time, could they be hiding inside? If he doesn't show up, could it be that we're just going to wait like this? Zhong Su raised his eyebrows and said so. That kid's spatial treasure has some skill. Although I didn't observe it carefully, I can see that it's extraordinary. So your guess is not without reason, Dai Xuanzhen said, paused for a moment, and continued. But it doesn't matter. They can't hide altogether. There will be a day when they come out. I don't believe that those people have such good patience and are willing to hide forever. But we can't afford to wait. If that kind of situation happens and the Divine Desolate Heavenlock Formation is placed here, the subsequent arrangements can't be carried out. Wang Qishuan said with some worry, There's no better way. We really can't afford to wait for too long. If they really don't come out, we can only give up on this place first. There are still many opportunities in the origin space. Let's try to find more and break through to the true Severing realm as soon as possible. At that time, if we can have several true Severing experts join forces, we can unleash the attack power of the Divine Desolate Heavenlock Formation. It will be much easier to deal with those people. Dai Xuanzhen thought for a moment and said so. In fact, he had advocated waiting for the situation in the origin space to stabilize and for someone on his side to reach the true Severing realm before taking action. However, he was rejected. Thinking about it now, Dai Xuanzhen had an indescribable vexation. He originally thought that the 6th prince and the little princess should be very easy to deal with. But who would have thought that in the end, they would still escape and he couldn't find their whereabouts? However, at this point, No one was able to change anything. They could only take one step at a time. If they really couldn't do it, it was better to look at the big picture and not waste too much time here. Send everyone out and search inch by inch. Don't let go of any place. If you find traces of the purple-robed youth and the others, inform the others immediately. Daishuanjin gave the final order and then led the group of people to continue searching the area of the divine, desolate Heavenlock Formation. While hundreds of people were searching the area within a radius of less than 1,000 miles, the ancient, desolate space was filled with a peaceful scene. Yu Chengliang, Yu Chengyu, He Jibai, and dozens of others were wholeheartedly immersed in cultivation as they sat cross-legged. Du Xiaofu and the flaming skeleton were also sitting opposite each other, discussing some matters. After several days of coaxing and pestering by Du Xiaofu, the flaming skeleton was annoyed beyond endurance. In the end, it could only bitterly and helplessly choose to compromise. It agreed to Du Xiaofu's suggestion. The two finally sat down quietly and began to discuss each other's requests. Senior, come. This is a sacred fruit that I brought from the outside world. It's fragrant and sweet and melts in your mouth. It's also quite beneficial to your cultivation. Try it and see. Du Xiaofu was very attentive. He took out a red fruit from his cosmos bag and handed it to the flaming skeleton. This red fruit, if placed in the divine martial world, was a rare sacred medicine. It had extraordinary medicinal properties and could cause people to fight over it. But when such a fruit was placed in front of the flaming skeleton, it instantly made him feel like he was about to collapse. Brat, are you trying to piss me off? I realize that you really are the bane of this old man's life. You're here to bring me down. The flaming skeleton finally calmed down and sat down, but it began to explode again. He could tell at a glance that the red fruit was extraordinary, but it was far from enough to catch the attention of a powerhouse like him. At most, he could only chew on it like a fruit. But most importantly, how was he supposed to eat it in his current state? This brat even said that it was fragrant and sweet and melted in his mouth. Did he dare say that he wasn't trying to stir up trouble? Du Xiaofu smiled awkwardly and put the sacred fruit away. He scratched the back of his head and said, Senior, if you want to recover, what kind of precious medicine do you need? He didn't beat around the bush and directly asked. It wasn't easy to get this old man to sit down and have a serious discussion with him. Du Xiaofu didn't want to make the atmosphere awkward again. This old man's biggest problem right now isn't that my body is damaged, but that my cultivation won't be able to recover in a short period of time. So, if I can find a place rich in spirit energy, or a medicine that contains a lot of spirit energy, I can slowly recover my strength. As long as I recover my strength, the problem with my body won't be a problem anymore. The flaming skeleton spoke to Du Xiaofu. I don't think it's that simple. All heavenly treasures usually have their own attributes. If it clashed with the attribute of your cultivation method, it might have the opposite effect. And although a place rich in spirit energy is good, it's not that easy to find. Du Xiaofu smacked his lips, feeling like he promised too much. Chapter 27-23. However, Du Xiaofu wasn't in a hurry. So long as he could obtain the benefits he wanted from the old man, it was only natural for him to put in some effort. Everything was only a matter of time, and he would eventually find the precious medicine he needed. All right, there's no point in talking about this for now. Everything will depend on fate. Since I've promised you, I'm absolutely not afraid of you going back on your word. Now, if you have anything you want to know, then ask. The flaming skeleton looked at Du Xiaofu's expression and spoke as such. At this moment, he was beginning to be sure that although this little fellow looked extremely unruly on the surface, he wasn't someone who would go back on his word. Moreover, if he was in such a state and couldn't move about in the outside world, he would really need his help. Junior Du Xiaofu comes from a minor world. I still don't know Senior's name. Du Xiaofu introduced himself and asked, You come from a minor world? This time, the skeletal old man was very surprised. This fellow actually came from a minor world? Then his talent was truly heaven-defying. However, the old man didn't hesitate and directly said to Du Xiaofu, As for my name, you don't need to know it for now. Just call me Elder Kong in the future. Du Xiaofu nodded, but before he could speak, he heard the skeletal old man continue asking, "Kid, let me ask you, are those little fellows over there from the Yuqing Divine Kingdom's imperial family?" He stretched out a withered claw and pointed at Yu Chengliang and Yu Chengyu in the crowd. Obviously, Elder Kong had listened to the conversations of those people earlier. Senior knows them? Du Xiaofu raised his brows, but he wasn't too surprised. After all, Elder Kong had stayed in the origin space for tens of thousands of years, and the origin space belonged to the Yuqing Divine Kingdom. So, it wasn't strange that Elder Kong knew about the Yuqing Divine Kingdom and even knew some people in the Yuqing Divine Kingdom. "I don't know these little fellows. When I fought with the blood-flame Divine Lotus and was trapped here, their father shouldn't have been born yet." Elder Kong shook his fleshless head as he spoke. Then, his empty eyes stared fixedly at the brother and sister as he smacked his lips and said, "The aptitudes of these little fellows are not bad. That old fellow is a good-for-nothing, but his descendants are much better than him." Elder Kong smacked his lips as he spoke, and he seemed to have recalled some old friends. "Elder Kong, who's that old fellow you're talking about?" Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows and asked with interest. "That old man is naturally the ancestor of those two little fellows." Elder Kong glanced at Du Xiaofu as he spoke indifferently. "The ancestors of the sixth prince and the little princess." Du Xiaofu widened his eyes in disbelief. He had already heard from He Jibai how powerful the Yuqing Divine Kingdom was. It was an absolute colossus. A divine kingdom was countless times more powerful than Du Xiaofu's own desolate country in the divine martial world. The ancestor of Yu Chengliang and Yu Chengyu was naturally the ancestor of the divine emperor of the Yuqing Divine Kingdom. How powerful was his cultivation? Du Xiaofu felt his breathing quicken as he stared blankly at the flaming skeleton. It seemed that this fellow in front of him was also an extremely powerful and abnormal person. He actually called the ancestor of a divine kingdom an old fellow. His background was definitely huge. What's with that look? Elder Kong seemed to roll his eyes at Du Xiaofu as he sneered, and felt disdain for Du Xiaofu's expression. That old fellow is absolutely not as strong as you imagine. His aptitude is really too stupid. His cultivation is completely dependent on treasures. It's just for show. In terms of comprehension of the power of law, he's simply trash. He thought for a long time before he could find a suitable word to describe it. No matter how stupid he is, his strength shouldn't be too bad, right? Du Xiaofu was still lamenting. He could imagine that with the support of the Yuqing Divine Kingdom, even a person with average aptitude would definitely be able to reach an extraordinary level. Most importantly, Elder Kong judged the other party based on his own strength. Naturally, he was biased. A cultivation that was piled up with countless treasures might be weak in battle, but that was only relative. To Du Xiaofu, it was still an existence that he had to look up to. However, this old man also doesn't understand. Even if that old fellow has the support of the Yuqing Divine Kingdom and can provide countless treasures for his cultivation, it definitely shouldn't be to that extent. Moreover, where did he get so many treasures? Every time I see him eating treasures that are hard to find in the 33 heavens like fruits, this old man's heart aches. Elder Kong clutched his chest with his withered claw and put on a pained expression. Even Du Xiaofu began to imagine the scene of the old ancestor of the Yuqing Divine Kingdom munching on the elixirs as if they were fruits. Regardless of which expert saw this, it was likely that they would reveal the same emotions as Elder Kong. "Elder Kong," Du Xiaofu shouted and called the skeletal old man back from his daze. "Forget it. Let's not talk about that old fellow." Elder Kong waved his hand, and then he stared at Du Xiaofu and asked, "Stinking kid, you've probably encountered some sort of trouble since you're hiding here, right?" "Yes." Du Xiaofu didn't deny it because there was nothing to conceal. Immediately, he told Elder Kong about the situation he was in, including the joint forces of the Divine General's estates to kill Yu Chengliang and Yu Chengyu, and the formation that trapped them. He told Elder Kong everything, no matter how big or small. After that, Du Xiaofu stared closely at Elder Kong's empty eye sockets, wanting to hear if he had a way to break the formation. "Based on what you've said, the formation outside should be the Divine Wilderness Heavenlock Formation without a doubt." Elder Kong thought for a moment and said, "Divine Wilderness Heavenlock Formation." Du Xiaofu frowned and said the name. He came from the divine martial world and entered the origin space as soon as he entered the 33 heavens. He didn't come into contact with anything else, so he didn't know anything about the divine wilderness heaven-lock formation. That's right. The divine wilderness heaven-lock formation is an ancient formation with great power. It's said that in ancient times, a peerless expert used this formation to envelop the 33 heavens, trapping countless demons and driving them to a corner to kill them. The most special thing about this formation is that it can trap the enemy in a corner, making it difficult for them to escape and only be able to fight like a cornered beast. In addition, the goal of that ancient expert was to prevent the Great War from causing the entire 33 heavens to be plunged into misery and suffering, or even to destroy the Great World. That was why he set it up. Elder Kong explained to Du Xiaofu, an ancient grand formation enveloping the 33 heavens, trapping and killing the demons. Du Xiaofu's heart immediately rose and fell. Just by imagining it, one could imagine what a grand scene it would be. The Yuqing Divine Kingdom had nearly 1 million young experts above the Void Return stage, so one could imagine how vast it was. And in the Supreme Changrong Heaven, there were the 36 Holy Lands and 72 Divine Kingdoms. The Yu Divine Kingdom couldn't be considered too strong among them. In addition, there were countless large and small forces. From this, one could infer how vast the entire Supreme Changrong Heaven was. And a divine wilderness heaven-lock formation from ancient times was actually able to envelop the entire 33 heavens. How terrifying was that scene? In addition, how powerful was the expert who set up the divine wilderness heaven-lock formation? How domineering was he? The divine wilderness heaven-lock formation is so powerful. I'm afraid that the things in the hands of the divine general's estates outside should be incomplete, right? Otherwise, it would be impossible for us to survive until now. Du Xiaofu sighed. He only needed to make a slight guess to know that the divine wilderness heaven-lock formation outside was absolutely not a complete thing. Otherwise, the few of them would have died a long time ago without even leaving a trace behind. One had to know that in ancient times, it was a grand formation that had trapped and killed countless demons. How could it be something that a few young experts like them could contend against? You're right. If we really talk about it, the grand formation outside can't be considered the divine wilderness heaven-lock formation at all. At most, it's a replica. It doesn't even possess 1/1,000,000th of the might of the true grand formation. This old man also doesn't understand why some people are so shameless. They actually used the name of that ancient great array directly. Elder Kong snorted disdainfully towards the divine wilderness heaven-lock formation of the divine general's estates, and he continued, however, when placed in this origin space, it's not bad to deal with a group of young experts. But I think that with the cultivation of those people at the Seizing God realm, they should only be able to display the formation's most basic trap ability. It doesn't possess any offensive ability at all. Indeed, after we entered, we were forever unable to find the way back. We could only continuously go deeper and be trapped within, and we didn't suffer any attacks. Du Xiaofu nodded as he spoke. Hee. Elder Kong suddenly chuckled and said, even the power of trap is far from being able to compare to the ancient times. The divine wilderness heaven-lock formation of the past directly drove countless devils into the centermost position, and no one was able to resist it. But now, if some of the people from the divine general's estates are able to break through to the true severing realm, then they would be barely able to display the ability of annihilation. At that time, it would be extremely difficult for all of you to easily escape. When he heard what Elder Kong said, Du Xiaofu's heart couldn't help but thump. Looks like even though the divine wilderness heaven-lock formation outside was only an extremely trashy replica, it absolutely couldn't be underestimated. Once Daishuanjin, Helian Shang, and the others broke through to the true severing realm, they would possess even more strength to control the grand formation. At that time, it would be too troublesome for him to deal with them. How did the divine general's estates in the Yuqing Divine Kingdom obtain such a grand formation? Elder Kong stroked his bald chin as he muttered to himself. Even though the divine wilderness heaven-lock formation outside was far inferior to the one from the ancient times, it was absolutely an unimaginably terrifying grand formation. In his knowledge, it was truly unreasonable for the divine general's estates to possess such a grand formation. Elder Kong, let's think of a way to escape now. We're truly too passive if we continue to be trapped here. Du Xiaofu stared at the skeletal old man as he spoke. If I was at my peak, dealing with this tiny replica wouldn't be difficult. But now, the strength I'm able to exert is even inferior to you, so I'm powerless to do anything about it. Elder Kong suddenly raised his head and sighed with emotion. Elder Kong, could it be that there's no way at all? Du Xiaofu frowned. He didn't want to hide in the ancient, desolate space forever. There were still countless fortuitous encounters in the ancient, desolate space, and he still wanted to properly search for them to increase his strength. Besides that, he also intended to think of a way to leave early and go out to investigate the whereabouts of the tomboy, Starry Star, and the others. It's not that there's no way. Elder Kong smacked his lips and said, but all of this will depend on your ability. Du Xiaofu was somewhat speechless. If he could solve it himself, why would he need to ask for help? He had already tried it a long time ago. Whether it was spatial law methods or lightning law methods, they were all useless against the divine, desolate heaven-lock formation outside. Not only that, even the red-bone horse monkey's primordial spirit, which had always been successful, was of no use. Otherwise, he would have tried to escape long ago. In fact, Du Xiaofu had also thought of going alone to meet the people from the divine general's estates. With his strength, even if he couldn't defeat them, it would be extremely easy for him to escape. But inside the array formation, his hands and feet would be tied. Once he was injured, or in an unexpected situation, he would be even more passive. He wouldn't even have a place to escape, and could only fight like a trapped beast. Stinking brat, think about it yourself. As long as it's an array formation, it's nothing more than a trapping array, a killing array, and an illusion array. Elder Kong gazed at Du Xiaofu and said, even though my attainments in the Tao of formations are ordinary, I'm still aware of this. As for the divine, desolate heaven-lock formation, it's a combination of three, and its power is extraordinarily great. However, the array formation outside currently only has the effect of a trapping array. The so-called trapping array is nothing more than using the power of spatial law to affect space and form a domain of its own. It has its own rules and order, and if one is trapped within, one must abide by the laws here. As he spoke, he slowed down and continued, just like this desolate ancient space of yours. Everything is within your control. In terms of profoundness, it's countless times more profound than the array formation outside. So, what do I have to do to break the array formation outside and escape the restrictions of space? Du Xiaofu seemed to have comprehended something. He seemed to have grasped a crucial point, but he felt that it was somewhat vague and couldn't help but ask. So, as long as you can comprehend your own spatial domain and pluck yourself out of the divine, desolate heaven-lock formation's envelopment, you can easily escape. Elder Kong looked closely at Du Xiaofu and said such a sentence. Comprehend your own domain and pluck yourself out of the divine, desolate heaven-lock formation's envelopment. Du Xiaofu couldn't help but frown as he started to ponder these words. He knew that Elder Kong's attainments in the spatial laws were countless times greater than his own. Elder Kong's words absolutely had a deep meaning within it, but if he wanted to truly grasp it, then he needed to comprehend it even more deeply. Kid, hit me again. Elder Kong suddenly shouted out and indicated that Du Xiaofu should make a move against him. All right. Du Xiaofu knew that the critical moment had arrived. Elder Kong wanted to demonstrate to him exactly what sort of realm pluck was. He didn't even think before abruptly swinging out his fist, and it blasted towards the flaming skeleton before him. Du Xiaofu's fist fluctuated with a violet gold glow that was extremely dazzling, and it at least carried 50% of his strength as it smashed directly towards the skeleton old man. The space within the desolate dimension started to fluctuate, and the sound of faintly cracking resounded out. When such a punch directly smashed before Elder Kong, it was like an old sow that had fallen into a quagmire, and its boundless strength was ceaselessly reduced. In next to no time, it had lost more than half of its strength. Du Xiaofu was greatly shocked in his heart. He'd already experienced such a situation once before, and it was precisely when he'd forced Elder Kong to chase after the main body of the blood-flame Divine Lotus, so the palm of light he swung out was unable to truly injure Elder Kong. Whoosh, in the end. When Du Xiaofu's fist came into contact with Elder Kong, the force behind it had already completely vanished into nothingness. On the other hand, the flaming skeleton still stood on the spot without moving. Kid, did you see it clearly? Elder Kong's empty eyes looked at Du Xiaofu as he asked. This is another method of utilizing the spatial laws? It's actually so miraculous. Du Xiaofu looked at Elder Kong as he spoke while staring blankly. After all, this was the desolate dimension. Everything was within his control, and all the laws and order were under his control. It was under such circumstances that Elder Kong was still able to achieve such an extent, and it couldn't help but cause Du Xiaofu to go pale with fright. This is the spatial domain. If you're able to fully comprehend the true essence within it, then not only will you be able to rely on it to escape the restraints of the formation outside, you'll even be able to take a step forward in your attainments in the spatial laws. Elder Kong faced Du Xiaofu as he spoke like this. Spatial domain. Form a domain that belongs to you, and pull yourself out from the space of the outside world. Du Xiaofu lowered his head and thought to himself. According to the ability Elder Kong had displayed earlier, he was able to sense that Elder Kong had clearly temporarily escaped the effects of the order within the desolate dimension. It could be said that if Elder Kong's strength was sufficient, then this space might not be able to trap him. Whereas if it was outside, then even though the divine desolate worldlock formation was extraordinary, if one was able to form a unique domain and escape the restraints of the formation, then escaping would be an extremely easy matter. Spatial domain. How can I form my own spatial domain? Du Xiaofu's brows knit together tightly, and he started to ponder. Elder Kong didn't disturb Du Xiaofu when he saw this, and he only allowed Du Xiaofu to fall into comprehension. At the same time, he couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This kid is extremely formidable. I've actually only demonstrated it once, and coupled with the one time I used it earlier, it's a total of 2 times. Yet it allowed Qian Shi to be enlightened and start to enter into his own comprehension. Did such a genius really come from a small world? This is truly slightly unbelievable. Chapter 27-24. Time silently flowed by. Within the desolate ancient space, He Zhibai, Yu Chengliang, Yu Chengyu, and the others were still endlessly breathing. This place had the effect of accelerating time, and it was much more efficient than cultivating in the outside world. They didn't want to miss this opportunity. On the other hand, Du Xiaofu was similarly immersed in extreme comprehension. Spatial domain. Mold one's own space, form a domain of one's own, and surpass the shackles and restraints of the outside world. Du Xiaofu lightly closed his eyes as he ceaselessly evolved the changes of the laws in his mind. Within his mud pill palace, the brand of the laws was glowing, and a portion of the markings ceaselessly flickered with radiance. Du Xiaofu himself had grasped a portion of the spatial laws, so when Elder Kong demonstrated the spatial domain, he was clearly able to sense waves of strange fluctuations emanating from Elder Kong's body. Strands of strange ripples drifted out from the skeleton that had lost its flesh and blood, and it emitted a strange and indescribable energy that caused the surrounding space to be affected. Strands of miraculous traces of the laws were evolving, arranging, and combining to transform into unfathomable energy of the laws. But these traces were extremely difficult to grasp. Even though Du Xiaofu was able to sense its existence, he still needed to ceaselessly fumble about the specific changes. If I utilize what I've grasped and compare it with the method Elder Kong executed, then perhaps I'll be able to obtain even more comprehension. Du Xiaofu's eyes were still closed, yet his hands unconsciously started to move in the air. It was as if numerous strange worlds were being born at the tip of his finger, and they emitted a miraculous energy, causing the space to start to be created and destroyed along with his movements. My strongest ability in the comprehension of the spatial laws is the skyward from the golden-winged rock clan, and the God's Bane grasp I comprehended during the battle with the Fiend Celestial. Du Xiaofu started to summarize what he'd learned, and he reflected it with the inspiration Elder Kong gave him. He found out from He Jibai that there were 4 great primordial laws in this world, and they were respectively time, space, matter, and soul. However, it was extremely difficult for most living beings to completely grasp the primordial laws when they cultivated. Even many figures with exceedingly high cultivations were only able to grasp the derivative forms of the 4 great primordial laws. For example, the matter law was divided into metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, lightning, and so on and so forth. Every law of matter attribute could be seen and touched, and there were traces of it. So, compared to the other 3 laws, it was much easier to explore its profundities. Under these circumstances, most living beings were able to fumble about the matter law. Even if there were many people, it was still difficult. It would be able to grasp it all of them. Therefore, Du Xiaofu still had a long way to go in wanting to reach the realm of perfection in his comprehension of spatial laws. However, in the endless years that the 33 heavens had existed, there had been no lack of extremely talented individuals that had been able to control one or even many complete primal laws. It was just that it was really hard to see that kind of person today. The law of space shouldn't be as complicated and vast as the law of matter, which can give birth to all things in the universe. However, its advantage lies in its boundless profoundness and profundity, allowing it to break free from the mold of the matter law. If I want to form my own space domain, then it's not much different from Fuyao and the God-binding grasp. The markings and true meaning of the laws are all there, and the most important thing is how to arrange and combine them to form the result I want. Du Xiaofu's thoughts did not stop at all. He was constantly pondering. According to his speculations, the first style of Fuyao, in the grip of God sealing, should have included many trajectories in the laws of space. If these trajectories were broken up and new trajectories were added in, they could be rearranged to form a new ability. Elder Kong's space domain must have come from this. When Elder Kong used the space domain, the traces of the laws should be like this. Du Xiaofu closed his eyes slightly as his fingers drew strange traces in the air. However, it was precisely this seemingly ordinary movement that caused circle after circle of ripples to arise in the surrounding space. Qianxi ceaselessly recalled the scene of Elder Kong demonstrating the space domain to him, and he tried his best to recall the miraculous rhythm within it. Along with the passage of time, Du Xiaofu stopped muttering, and he fell into absolute silence. The only thing that didn't change was the ceaseless movements of his body. Along with this, a miraculous and indescribable state arose from his body. It caused him to seem as if he'd fused into one with the space within the primordial dimension and left it in the next. It was as if his existence was only a projected scene. However, this state was extremely unstable, and it was ceaselessly changing. However, this scene was extremely shocking in the eyes of the flaming skeleton old man at the side. Amazing! What a kid! Your natural talent is truly extraordinary. You've started to comprehend something so quickly. Amazing! Elder Kong exclaimed in a low voice. He seemed to be somewhat incoherent, and there was an indescribable sigh in his voice. If it wasn't for the fact that he had lost his flesh and blood and couldn't show any expression, his eyes would definitely be wide open and filled with shock. This kind of talent, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call it abnormal. Not to mention 10,000 years, even 1,000,000 years would be hard to come by. He couldn't be blamed for losing his composure. Du Xiaofu, a native from the divine martial world, didn't know, but as a powerhouse in the 33 heavens, Elder Kong knew exactly what kind of talent this young man was displaying. It could be said that in the entire younger generation of the 33 heavens, it would be difficult to find someone who could compare to this stinking brat in terms of talent and comprehension. In fact, the flaming skeleton didn't know that the reason why Du Xiaofu was able to comprehend something so quickly was mainly because he had already grasped the heavenly Tao of the divine martial world. All the rules and order of that world could be mobilized at will. Not to mention the space domain, which was a method of using the laws of space. Even the 4 primordial laws could be combined and changed at will in the divine martial world. Therefore, with such a foundation, if Du Xiaofu wanted to comprehend some dharma and logos on his own, it would naturally be much faster than usual. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, nearly 3 months had passed. In the desolate ancient space, Everything was still as calm as ever. Everyone was still in a state of cultivation and hadn't left. Du Xiaofu's previous movements had also stopped, and he just sat there quietly. Strange fluctuations constantly emitted from his body. Outside his body, the space was transforming, morphing, and growing. It was as if one world after another was appearing and then being destroyed. Old Kong's empty eye sockets had been staring at Du Xiaofu the entire time. The flames on the skeleton leaped, releasing a blazing high temperature. His mind was constantly paying attention to the changes on Du Xiaofu's body. Until a certain moment, the skeleton that was emitting a fiery red glow suddenly trembled, as if it had sensed some kind of unusual movement. Following that, the calm atmosphere in this space was finally broken. A buzzing sound was heard, and it swept through the void, hitting the primordial spirits of everyone in the desolate ancient space. This buzzing impact was not a real sound wave, but a sudden change in some invisible law that triggered a strange rhythm. Everyone who was in this space could clearly feel it. The hundreds of people from the Yuqing Divine Kingdom all opened their eyes at the same time and looked around in confusion. What's going on? Everyone was confused, and they had no idea what was going on. Just now, it seemed like a string in my heart was touched, and I was suddenly pulled out of my cultivation state. Me too. That fluctuation was so strange. Why did we all feel it at the same time? It felt like some kind of heavenly sound, and it was everywhere, and it directly penetrated into our souls. Most importantly, I felt that there was an indescribable change in this space that I'm in. Yu Chengliang, Yu Chengyu, and He Jibai were all puzzled, and after a short discussion, they all swept their eyes around, trying to find the source of the fluctuation. When they looked at the purple-robed young man who was sitting cross-legged not far away, all of their eyes were fixed on him, and they could not move away. In front of Du Xiaofu, the flaming skeleton directly retreated, leaving the purple-robed young man's area of several dozen feet. At this moment, a huge circle of light with a radius of about 5 feet emerged from Du Xiaofu's body, forming a perfect sphere that enveloped his body. This circle of light emitted an immeasurable amount of light, dazzling everyone's eyes, and looked like a translucent ball of light. It's Brother Du. The fluctuation just now must have come from him. Did he comprehend something? How could this happen? Why is it that when I look at him, Brother Du is clearly in front of me, but why do I feel like he doesn't exist in this space? The law of space. Brother Du's comprehension of the law of space has improved. Everyone began to discuss enthusiastically, but it was difficult for them to see through the reason for the change in Du Xiaofu's body. In the end, it was Yu Chengliang who spoke up to explain the reason behind it. In an instant, everyone felt a little absent-minded, especially He Jibai and his subordinates. They had a lot of contact with Du Xiaofu, and they had also seen his various methods. But at this moment, hearing that his attainments in the law of space had deepened, how could they not be shocked? But although they were shocked, the matter did not end there. Swoosh! In the ball of light, Du Xiaofu also opened his eyes, and 2 rays of light shot out from his eyes, as if they were solid. Immediately, everyone saw that as the light in the purple-robed young man's eyes dimmed, the immeasurable amount of light on the ball of light also slowly faded, and finally all of it disappeared, no longer emitting light. But in the eyes of everyone, the violet-robed figure had become even more indistinct at this moment. They were clearly able to see it with their own eyes, yet they felt it was extremely blurry. At this moment, they seemed to have truly felt that Du Xiaofu really didn't exist in this space, and only a scene remained here. Good kid. The flaming skeleton praised, and then it took a step forward and charged directly towards Du Xiaofu. Its bone claw stretched out and clawed fiercely, and the space within the desolate ancient space was soundlessly shattered by this claw. Along the direction of the claw, 5 pitch-black claw marks appeared, and it was savage and terrifying. The bone claw's speed was extremely swift, and as soon as it attacked, it brazenly charged into an area of over 10 m in front of Du Xiaofu. It was also at this moment that Elder Kong's movements suddenly slowed down, and it was as if he'd encountered an extremely terrifying obstruction, causing every single inch he moved forward to become extremely difficult. Rumble. At the same time, rumbling sounds resounded from that area, and it was like a heavy hammer that was oppressive and mighty, and there was also the strong sound of metal rubbing against each other. In the end, Elder Kong's claw stopped when it was around 6 m away from Du Xiaofu, and it was unable to move forward in the slightest. On the other hand, Du Xiaofu still stood on the spot, and even the corners of his clothes hadn't moved in the slightest. Such a strange scene caused the eyeballs of He Jibai and the others to almost pop out. They clearly sensed that the violet-robed young man didn't reveal any vital energy, and besides the uniqueness of that space, they didn't notice any energy fluctuations around him. Hee. Under the gazes of everyone, Du Xiaofu couldn't help but reveal a smile. At this moment, he felt extremely happy in his heart. After a few months of bitter comprehension, he'd finally grasped the path to spatial domain, and even Elder Kong's attack was unable to truly break through it. It could be said that at this moment, Du Xiaofu's heart was extremely satisfied and filled with a sense of accomplishment. The fact showed that he'd taken a great step forward on the path of the spatial laws. But right when the smile on Du Xiaofu's face had just arisen and hadn't completely melted, his expression suddenly froze. Swoosh! Right under Du Xiaofu's trembling gaze, Elder Kong's claw that had stopped moving forward actually moved swiftly once more, and it brazenly clawed down towards Du Xiaofu's neck. On the other hand, the domain that he'd created from drawing upon the spatial laws seemed to have been stirred by a shapeless hand, and all the orderliness in it was instantly destroyed and in complete disorder. The spatial domain technique he just comprehended had actually been broken through. Hiss! Elder Kong's withered claw that burned with flames had already arrived before Du Xiaofu in an instant, and it directly slashed down. If it wasn't for him executing the rising sun style and retreating explosively at the last moment, Du Xiaofu was afraid that he would have been directly grabbed by Elder Kong. Even so, a blurry mark appeared on the front of Du Xiaofu's violet robe, and it was burned by the flames on the claw. Stinking brat, you've just grasped the path to success, yet you're already complacent and can't help but feel complacent, right? When he saw Du Xiaofu retreat, Elder Kong didn't pursue and attack, and instead stood firmly at the place where Du Xiaofu stood before, and a hoarse and aged voice sounded out from the skeleton that didn't have any flesh and blood. At this moment, the smile on Du Xiaofu's face was still frozen on his face, and it seemed indescribably strange. What a formidable ability of that skeleton! He Jibai, Yu Chengliang, Yu Chengyu, and the others were shocked as well. Originally, they were still feeling astounded by Du Xiaofu's comprehension. But the situation had changed too quickly, and his domain had been broken through in only an instant. The method of utilizing the spatial laws looks like what I've grasped is only the tip of the iceberg. Du Xiaofu retreated to a nearby spot and didn't reply to Elder Kong, and he instead started to ponder by himself, and there was an indescribable sigh in his heart. His comprehension of the spatial domain had indeed made great progress, but before Elder Kong, it was still so weak, and this caused Du Xiaofu to be unable to help but feel slightly powerless. Before an expert of the older generation, he still seemed to be too immature and weak. The spatial domain is able to form one's own domain and allow one to stand independently from the space one stands in, but it doesn't mean that this ability is impossible to break through. Elder Kong's skeleton took light steps forward and walked about in the desolate ancient space as he explained to Du Xiaofu. The Tao of laws has a myriad of changes, not to mention the spatial laws of the 4 great primordial laws, even the metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, lightning, and so on and so forth that are derived from the material laws contain boundless profundities. If it's utilized properly, it can develop into various divine abilities. As Elder Kong spoke, he paused for a moment before continuing. So, even though it's not a bad thing for a young man to possess outstanding natural talent and comprehension ability that surpasses others, the path of cultivation is endless. There's utterly no one in the world capable of seeing through the profundities of the Tao carrier and manifestation realms of the 9 great realms. Presently, your attainments in the spatial laws still have a very long way to go, so you must not be complacent. Thank you for your guidance, Elder Kong. I'll remember it well. Du Xiaofu bowed sincerely to the flaming skeleton and replied seriously. He was naturally able to discern that Elder Kong's words carried the intention of admonishing, and it was like a senior that was absolutely doing it for his own good. But Du Xiaofu wasn't an impetuous person, and it was absolutely impossible for him to become complacent because of a momentary achievement. Perhaps it was precisely because he'd perceived this that Elder Kong's words weren't strict, and he only reminded Chen Shi. "It's good that you know." The flaming skeleton nodded without end, and it was extremely satisfied with this violet-robed young man before it. It walked over to Du Xiaofu and continued. "Have you thought of a name for this move? Please bestow it to me, Elder Kong." Du Xiaofu shook his head and spoke. The comprehension of this move came from Elder Kong, so it couldn't be any more suitable for him to name it. "This move you've comprehended was born from my comprehension, yet it's slightly different." Elder Kong strode forward once more and said, "My spatial domain combines strength and gentleness, and it emphasizes on splitting the strength of my opponent, yet its consumption is extremely small. On the other hand, you're absolutely domineering and ferocious, and you exert all your strength to completely annihilate all attacks in their initial form. Since it's like this, then this move of yours shall be called the Absolute Domain. What do you think?" As the flaming skeleton spoke, it shot its gaze towards Du Xiaofu in the end, and it seemed to want to ask for Du Xiaofu's opinion. Chapter 27-25. Absolute Hegemony Domain. "Let's do as Elder Kong says." Du Xiaofu tasted this name and nodded repeatedly, feeling that it was very suitable. He could also feel that when Elder Kong used the space domain, his attacks seemed to have sunk into a quagmire, being weakened step by step until all his strength was exhausted. His own technique, on the other hand, was to form an absolutely strong domain. When Elder Kong's claws attacked, the domineering power would collide directly, making it impossible for him to get close. If Elder Kong's domain was a pool of clear water, where hardness and gentleness were combined to achieve the greatest effect with the smallest price, then his own technique was a solid wall, crushing all enemies that encroached upon it. Therefore, the same method of using the law of space, but in terms of the details, there was still a big gap. Your absolute hegemony domain needs to be comprehended again. There are still some areas that need to be adjusted, but I won't go into too much detail with you. Your cultivation is already not bad. What you need to do next is to walk your own path. You can only comprehend other people's techniques, but you can't fully understand them. However, you only need to remember one thing. The space domain doesn't just pluck yourself out of the original space, you also need to move freely within it. When the enemy attacks you, you can use your own domain to counterattack. Even more so, when you form an absolute domain, all the rules are set by you, so that the enemy can't even use their cultivation, let alone attack. Elder Kong looked at Du Xiaofu and slowly explained to him. "I understand, thank you, Elder Kong." Du Xiaofu nodded, indicating that he understood. Elder Kong's words made him think of Shenwu World. Over there, he could be said to be the absolute ruler. Although the order there was not set by him, all the rules could be mobilized. The absolute domain that Elder Kong spoke of should be very similar to this situation. Thinking of this, Du Xiaofu also began to look forward to it. If his comprehension of the law of space could reach that level, then when he faced enemies, he would have too much of the initiative, no different from when he was in Shenwu World. Of the 4 primordial laws, I've already made some achievements in the laws of space and the laws of matter, but I don't seem to have many tricks up my sleeves for the laws of time and the laws of soul. Du Xiaofu pondered over some things. Of course, the more methods he had, the better. If he could also comprehend the laws of time and the laws of soul, it would definitely not be a bad thing. Unfortunately, Du Xiaofu was completely clueless about the laws of time at the moment. He had no clue about it at all. As for the law of the soul, his grasp of immortality profundity and dark insight grasp profundity were still at the level of profundity. It was very difficult for him to comprehend them further. In fact, they also lacked some opportunities and opportunities. Elder Kong, you've already attained perfection in the laws of space, right? Du Xiaofu suddenly opened his mouth and asked. After he asked this question, Elder Kong didn't speak for a long time, and he stared fixedly at Chen Shi with his empty eye sockets. If he had flesh and blood at this moment, then the expression in his eyes when he looked at Du Xiaofu would absolutely be as if he was looking at an idiot. Do you think that a primordial law is really so easy to completely grasp? After a long time, Elder Kong glanced sideways at Du Xiaofu and scoffed at him. This? Du Xiaofu was instantly rendered speechless. He'd witnessed Elder Kong's various tricks. In the lava space, this old fellow had executed many profound divine abilities, and it caused Du Xiaofu to feel extremely envious. For example, Elder Kong had stretched out his hand to create a spatial rift and directly swallowed Qian Shi's attack, and it didn't even cause the slightest bit of commotion before it was directly obliterated into nothingness. If it was anyone else that dared to do this, then the spatial rift would probably be directly destroyed by Qian Shi's attacks. Another example was when the two of them joined forces to deal with the Blood Flame Divine Lotus. With Qian Shi's strength, it was extremely difficult for him to effectively cause harm to the Blood Flame Divine Lotus. On the other hand, Elder Kong had created a spatial passageway, and Qian Shi only had to close his eyes and execute his moves, causing all his attacks to strike the Blood Flame Divine Lotus through the spatial passageway. These two methods were extremely overbearing. Coupled with the spatial domain, Du Xiaofu felt that Elder Kong was a person that had completely grasped the laws of space, and it was within reason. But the truth was that it wasn't so. Since the existence of the 33 heavens, there weren't many people that were able to completely grasp one of the 4 great primordial laws. So long as one completely grasped one of the 4, then one would be able to attain an extremely high realm of cultivation. Such an extraordinary figure would absolutely be a mighty lord, and even the entire 33 heavens would tremble with the stomp of their feet. Such an existence would never make an appearance in the world, and it's extremely rare to see one. As Elder Kong spoke, he couldn't help but let out a long sigh. But after he thought for a moment, he heard Elder Kong say once more, "However, even if it's difficult to see, it doesn't mean that there's absolutely no one capable of accomplishing it. So, kid, don't think too much about it. It's better to obediently walk down the path beneath your feet. This is the true path of a king." "I understand." Du Xiaofu nodded, and he instantly understood Elder Kong's intentions. What Elder Kong spoke of was a situation that really existed. The 4 great primordial laws were deep and vast, and practically no one was capable of seeing through them. But Elder Kong didn't want to cause any bad psychological barriers to Du Xiaofu because of what he'd said. In this way, it would absolutely be an extremely great calamity to Du Xiaofu's future path of cultivation. Thus, he'd added such a sentence at the end. When he thought up to here, Du Xiaofu had an extremely good impression of this old man that only had a skeleton remaining. "What else do you want to ask? Ask now. Once you've finished asking, I won't continue tormenting myself with you. The key is to properly recover your strength." Elder Kong sat down cross-legged on the ground and left behind these words. "Elder Kong, I want to know what truth-severing and eternal are." Du Xiaofu sat before Elder Kong as well, and he didn't even think before asking such a question. Actually, he really wanted to ask about the meditative realm, Tao Carrier realm, and phenomenal realm as well. But when he thought about how these realms were truly too illusory and too far away from him, he gave up. Not to mention that even if he asked, Elder Kong might not be able to answer him. Because he Jibai had once told Du Xiaofu that once one grasped a complete primordial law, then stepping into the meditative realm was something that would happen naturally. Obviously, Elder Kong hadn't attained the meditative realm, let alone the Tao Carrier realm and phenomenal realm. The meaning of truth-severing is to sever the confinement and reconstruct the true self. Elder Kong immediately spoke in such a manner. Sever the confinement and reconstruct the true self. Du Xiaofu was slightly bewildered. He was able to understand the literal meaning, yet the deeper meaning seemed to be slightly blurry. But Du Xiaofu pondered for a short moment and recalled something he Jibai had once told him. The myriad of grand Taos are for the sake of tracing to the source and returning to the beginning. Only the true energy of the laws was the ultimate goal of a living being's cultivation. Could it be that the truth-severing realm is related to the energy of the laws? Elder Kong's following words answered the questions in Du Xiaofu's heart. There are a myriad of laws in the heavens and the earth, and the laws grasped by living beings are mainly the laws of matter. Every single living being possesses various methods, and it's even to the extent that numerous laws are gathered in one body. Moreover, if one wants to attain a deeper realm, then it's absolutely impossible to advance in such a state. This is like a sapling. If one wants to grow into a towering tree, then one has to cut off the excess branches in order to grow thicker, stronger, and taller. After Elder Kong finished speaking, he didn't speak again for the time being, and only looked at Du Xiaofu to allow him to digest the contents of these words. After repeatedly pondering, Du Xiaofu finally had some ideas. The so-called truth-severing realm was a process of ceaselessly correcting one's self. Pruning the branches wasn't to completely cut off the side branches, but to tell the world that if one wanted to attain a higher realm, then one had to focus on a certain law and advance along this path. Only in this way would one be able to attain a higher realm. For example, after attaining the truth-severing realm, if one wanted to go further on the path of cultivation, then one had to grasp the complete laws of matter or the laws of space. Only in this way would one have the opportunity to step into the higher realm of immortality. When he thought up to here, Du Xiaofu told Elder Kong of his thoughts, wanting to know if his conjecture was correct. Kid, your comprehension ability is really not bad. Your understanding is very correct. Elder Kong pointed at the bald skull as he spoke. Then in this way, Elder Kong is also an expert of the truth-severing realm? Du Xiaofu's brows raised as he asked abruptly. But a question like this caused the skeletal old man to fall into a state of astonishment. After that, he chuckled and said, Kid, I know what you're thinking. You think that in the truth-severing realm, grasping the complete true meaning of the four great primeval laws is equivalent to grasping a complete primeval law at this time. On the other hand, I haven't grasped the complete laws of space, so you made this deduction, right? Elder Kong's eye sockets stared fixedly at Du Xiaofu, and he looked at him without moving in the slightest. Du Xiaofu felt his hair stand on end from being stared at to the point of being slightly scared, but he still couldn't help but nod in agreement. But it caused Elder Kong to roar with hoarse laughter. After a long while, the laughter gradually stopped, and Elder Kong said, You still don't understand. The so-called complete primeval laws aren't something that can be attained by grasping the complete true meaning of all the laws. Moreover, this is precisely related to the realm of immortality that you asked about. The so-called immortality is the fusion of the laws and returning to the beginning, transforming the body into the primeval Tao of the universe, eternal and indestructible. In the realm of immortality, what you have to do is to fuse all the true meanings you've grasped together, and only in this way would it be the most complete primeval laws. Naturally, after this step is accomplished, you'll attain the strength of the meditative realm. Kid, do you understand what I'm saying? When Elder Kong spoke up to hear, Du Xiaofu had a feeling of sudden enlightenment. He finally understood exactly what sort of two realms the truth-severing realm and the immortal realm were. Frankly speaking, the truth-severing realm was ceaselessly searching for the true meaning of the laws. Time, space, matter, soul, these four great primeval laws, at least choose one of them as the direction to comprehend with all one's strength. Only by completely comprehending the myriad of true meanings developed from a certain primeval law would one be able to step into the immortal realm. On the other hand, the so-called immortal realm was to fuse the true meanings of these laws one by one to form a truly complete primeval law and obtain an immortal body. If nothing unexpected happened, then one would be able to exist forever and be indestructible through the ages. At this point in time, Du Xiaofu finally had a certain understanding of the realm he needed to cultivate in the future. Although he was very puzzled in his heart, there were countless grand Tao laws and myriad orders of heaven and earth. In the truth-severing realm, how could one comprehend all the true meanings of a certain primeval law? Just by thinking about it, one could tell that this was an extremely huge project. However, he didn't have any intention of cowering in his heart. The path of cultivation was filled with difficulties and dangers in the first place. If one was timid and moved forward, then one could only stay where one was. The more difficult it was, the more Du Xiaofu would face it head-on. But Elder Kong, I've already grasped the complete law of lightning now. What should I do to be able to step into the truth-severing realm? Suddenly, Du Xiaofu furrowed his brows and threw out another question. He was also puzzled. After arriving at the 33 heavens, he found out from the old man from the school of vertical and horizontal that he was at the consummate stage of the seizing God realm and was only a step away from the truth-severing realm. But Du Xiaofu also didn't understand exactly what kind of existence was obstructing this step of distance. Relying on this opportunity, he naturally asked Elder Kong about it. After grasping a complete law in the seizing God realm, even though it said that one is only a step away from the truth-severing realm, but this step is separated by an extremely vast chasm. If one wants to take this step, it's not difficult, but it's not easy either. All of this only requires an opportunity. Elder Kong raised his arm and stretched out a finger as he spoke. An opportunity? What sort of opportunity? Du Xiaofu was instantly interested and hurriedly asked, "Isn't this opportunity one of the objectives of all of you entering this origin space?" Elder Kong replied, but still kept them in suspense. Du Xiaofu started to scratch his head with a bellyful of questions. He Jibai had told him that the origin space was opened for the sake of the young disciples' tempering, but he didn't speak of this objective. Thus, when Elder Kong mentioned it, he felt completely confused. When he was conversing with Jibai at that time, because he was trapped in the divine desolate heavenlock formation, he didn't continue. So he didn't know much, and there were some things that he didn't have the time to ask. There's a type of chaotic energy within this origin space. If you obtain it, then you only need a trace of it to be able to smoothly step into the truth-severing realm with the strength of the perfection stage of the seizing God realm. When Elder Kong saw Du Xiaofu's expression, it seemed as if he really didn't know about this matter. So he didn't beat around the bush and spoke directly. Chaotic energy. What's that? It could be said that the doubts that arose in Du Xiaofu's mind today were truly too many. He felt that his knowledge was completely insufficient, and he could practically be considered to know nothing about the existences within the 33 heavens. His lack of knowledge was enough to make one's hair stand on end. Chaotic energy is the energy left behind from the chaos after Pangu split open the heavens, so it's called chaotic energy. This entire world was formed from the chaos, so chaotic energy naturally contains the quintessence energy of this world. No matter which law one cultivates, chaotic energy is suitable for all of them. Elder Kong opened his mouth and explained, "So that's how it is. Chaotic energy contains the quintessence energy of the world, and it's even purer than the energy of laws. No wonder it's said that at the truth-severing realm, there's hope to be able to figure out the complete true meaning of a certain primordial law. I presume that it requires the assistance of chaotic energy to accomplish it, right?" Du Xiaofu's eyes lit up, and he felt as if he was enlightened. He was still thinking earlier that the 4 great primordial laws contained so many true meanings, and wanting to fully comprehend all of them at the truth-severing realm was truly exceedingly difficult. But since Elder Kong mentioned this, he quickly figured out this point, and it was surely related to the quintessence energy that chaotic energy carried. "You're worth teaching." Elder Kong nodded, and he was extremely satisfied with Du Xiaofu's comprehension ability. "Elder Kong, could it be that only by obtaining chaotic energy can one step into the truth-severing realm, and there's no other way?" Du Xiaofu spoke once more and asked like this. According to what he thought, on the path of cultivation, external things were only means, and absolutely not the goal. No matter how formidable that strand of chaotic energy was, it wasn't cultivated by oneself in the end, and this seemed to be contrary to the essence of cultivation. "Kid, you're really..." Elder Kong shook his head helplessly, yet he didn't know what to say to Chen Shi. Even though this question was asked at a very high level, it truly caused one to be slightly speechless. With this kid's strength, obtaining chaotic energy isn't difficult. At that time, wouldn't it be fine if he just obediently broke through? Why did he have to get to the bottom of it? Even though Elder Kong was helpless, he didn't hesitate, and he said, "Chaotic energy is indeed a necessary thing to break through to the truth-severing realm, and this isn't contrary to the path of cultivation. This is the same principle as the spirit energy of heaven and earth you absorb when cultivating. Only, above this threshold, what's required is chaotic energy. It's just that simple." "I understand." Du Xiaofu nodded. He didn't continue to be conflicted on this question, and continued to ask some other questions. After that, he greeted Elder Kong before continuing to sit cross-legged on the ground and fell into deep comprehension. Du Xiaofu had just comprehended the divine ability, absolute domain, and there were still too many areas that needed to be perfected. Just as Elder Kong had said, he couldn't be considered to have matured in this Tao, and there was extremely great room for improvement. Moreover, Du Xiaofu wanted to ponder over some other methods that Elder Kong had utilized in the past. If he was able to comprehend them, then not only would he be able to deal with his enemies with ease, even his attainments in the spatial laws would be deeper. Besides this, Du Xiaofu was still thinking about the other two primitive laws, and they were the time laws and soul laws that he hadn't grasped. Everyone said that it was basically impossible to grasp many primitive laws, but Du Xiaofu didn't think so. Others were unable to do it, but it absolutely didn't mean that he couldn't do it. No matter what, he had to give it a try. Chapter 27-26. As Du Xiaofu was immersed in his comprehension, the time outside the desolate ancient space was also quietly slipping away. Several days passed silently like this. The people from the Divine General's estate did not stop searching, wanting to find traces of Du Xiaofu. However, what made everyone feel disappointed was that even after they had searched all the hiding places in the Divine Desolate Heavenlock Formation, they were unable to find any trace of the purple-robed youth. As the controller of the Divine Desolate Heavenlock Formation, they could naturally come and go as they pleased. However, after searching every inch of the area, they did not find their target. If the purple-robed youth was so powerful that he had already left the range of the formation, they would never believe it. That kind of method was definitely not something an ordinary person could do. Of course, they could not completely rule out this possibility, but the chances were too small. Young Master Dai, we can't waste any more time here. Zhong Su from the profound, desolate general's estate looked at Dai Xuanjin and said with a frown. They had spent nearly 10 days here without any results, so everyone could not help but feel a little tired. Zhong Su is right. That kid must be hiding in his spatial treasure and escaped our detection. Otherwise, after such a long time, no matter how profound his cultivation is, he will definitely not be able to hide. Wang Qishuan from the Divine General's estate also said softly. Although it's still early before the end of the Origin Space's training, we still have very important things to do. Indeed, we can't waste any more time here. Otherwise, if he keeps hiding inside and doesn't come out, no one will be able to do anything to him. Zhong Su said again. While the three of them were talking, many of their subordinates were still searching around. From time to time, there would be figures shuttling back and forth. But it's not a good idea for us to withdraw just like this. Dai Xuanjin was silent for a long time before he took over the conversation and said, without the Divine Desolate Heavenlock Formation's encirclement, that kid is in the Origin Space and it will be very difficult for anyone to restrain him. Most importantly, if he spreads what happened here and the people outside know about it, the other princes and princesses, as well as the people from the three Divine Generals' manors, they will be prepared. This will bring great trouble to our future operations. When they heard Dai Xuanjin's words, Zhong Su and Wang Qishuan couldn't help but nod repeatedly to express their agreement. They could not afford to waste time. But if they were to leave this place and put away the Divine Wilderness Heavenlock Array, the consequences would be unimaginable. If it was just a kid with a high cultivation, they wouldn't have much to worry about. However, if he worked together with the other princes and princesses, plus the people from the other three Divine Generals' estates, they would definitely be a force that couldn't be underestimated. They first attacked the sixth prince and the little princess, but their goal was not to kill them. Their biggest purpose was to use them as hostages so that they could play an important role at a critical moment. Originally, he thought that it would be a piece of cake to deal with these two fellows who weren't too strong. However, no one had expected that when they were about to succeed, Du Xiaofu would suddenly appear and disrupt all their plans. When he thought of this, Dai Xuanjin felt his blood boil. He wished that he could drag that purple-robed kid out and smash him into a pile of meat paste. That kid had not only disrupted their plans, he had also injured his third brother and crippled his second brother. If he didn't take revenge for this, His divine void general's estate would have no place to hide its face. Young Master Dai, what should we do? Wang Qishuan turned to look at Dai Xuanjun and asked. No matter how much he said, he still had to come up with an idea in the end. We still can't let go of this place so easily. That kid can't do anything by himself, but we definitely can't leak the news. Dai Xuanjun thought for a moment, then said, Inform Helian Chung to take his men and retreat first. Let him reach the truth-severing stage as soon as possible. At that time, it will be easier to find that kid and deal with him. I'll take a group of people and stay here. Don't remove the divine wilderness heaven-lock formation for the time being. As long as that kid dares to show his face, he will die without a burial ground. As Dai Xuanjun spoke, his fists unconsciously clenched. That's the only way. Let's stay here with young Master Dai. After a while, Helian and the others will take over. Zhongsu nodded and said in agreement. After everyone's discussion, they finally carried out Dai Xuanjun's idea. The search continued, and several experts of the seizing divinity stage also participated in it. They continued to wander around the divine wilderness heaven-lock formation. Under such circumstances, another 3 days passed. At this time, Helian Shang of Divine General In He's estate had already left with a group of people. At this time, they continued to explore the origin space. There were countless opportunities that couldn't be missed. Most importantly, there was also the chaotic yuan qi that all experts of the seizing divinity stage needed. They needed to find it. The origin space could be said to be a training battlefield for the younger generation. As experts who stood at the peak, such as Dai Xuanjun and Helian Shang, they actually had the opportunity to break through to the severing truth stage long ago. However, if they broke through too early, they would lose the opportunity to enter this space. They held back the opportunity to break through so that they could find more opportunities here. On this day, the divine wilderness heaven-lock formation was still calm. There were only figures flying back and forth, searching in various obscure places, hoping to find the hiding place of the purple-robed youth. It was also at this time that Du Xiaofu, who had been comprehending for several months, walked out of the ancient desolate space and appeared in a mountain range. There were towering mountains and precipitous ridges that extended into the distance. The valleys were deep and the terrain was dangerous. There were many plants and giant trees on the mountain, and there were also wild beasts. However, such wild beasts couldn't pose any threat to Du Xiaofu, whose cultivation wasn't bad. He brought He Zhibai, Yu Chengliang, and Yu Chengyu to find a place with beautiful scenery and built a bonfire. He washed the wild beasts that he hunted and began to roast them. Soon, the fragrance of meat wafted out from the valley and spread in all directions. Yu Chengliang, Yu Chengyu, and He Zhibai's cultivation had long been above the common populace, but at this time, they couldn't help but feel a little hungry. I didn't expect Brother Du to have such skills. He Zhibai's saliva flowed out. He took a roasted deer from Du Xiaofu's hand and opened his mouth to take a bite. He only felt that his mouth was full of fragrance. Indeed, it's been a long time since I've eaten something like this. I really miss it. The sixth prince and the little princess also didn't want to fall behind and began to taste Du Xiaofu's cooking. Ever since they were born, what they ate the most was not the food of mortals. Instead, they ate countless heavenly treasures to strengthen their physical bodies and souls. At this time, when they ate the deer meat, they felt that it was a special taste. Du Xiaofu looked at them and felt that it was a little funny. These fellows were born with extraordinary backgrounds and had been supported by a large family or divine kingdom since they were young. It was very difficult for them to experience the joy of it. It had been a long time since he last cooked barbecue. The most recent occasion was in the ancient desolation fearsome ground. After killing the ancestor of the distant Sky Flame Phoenix tribe and the ancestor of the Gulen Heavenly Condor tribe, he held a Grand Beast Alliance food festival in the Beast King mountain range of the Baifeng Divine Bird tribe. Since then, he had been busy dealing with the devil religion and didn't have the leisure to do these things. But now that the devil god was dead, Shenwu world was peaceful, and there were a few people who had agreed to guard it. Du Xiaofu's huge burden was lifted. Therefore, when he walked out of the ancient wilderness, he had the urge to make some delicious food. Since he couldn't get out of the origin space for a while, he might as well enjoy it first. This wild deer meat, compared to dragon meat, the taste is still a lot worse. Du Xiaofu said unclearly as he chewed on the fresh and tender meat. But such a comment, in the ears of He Jibai and the others, they couldn't help but be shocked. Dragon? Dragon meat? The little princess Yu Qingyu looked a little dazed, a piece of meat hanging outside her red lips, and her beautiful eyes were wide open. Dragons are an extremely powerful race. They are also the peak existences in the 33 heavens. Brother Du, you actually dare to eat dragon meat? He Jibai stared at Du Xiaofu as if he was staring at a monster. Many dragons have died in my hands. What's the fuss about eating some dragon meat? Du Xiaofu said in an indifferent tone, which made the three of them stare at him. Although He Jibai knew that Du Xiaofu came from a small world, no matter which world it was, as long as it was a dragon, it was one of the strongest creatures. No one dared to provoke it. But this guy, when talking about eating dragon meat, was actually so calm. Was it because he was thick-skinned, or was it because he was a fearless guy? If there's a chance in the future, I'll take you to eat all over the 33 heavens. Du Xiaofu chuckled as he looked at the three of them, throwing out such a sentence. As he spoke, he was a little lost in thought, thinking of Du Xiaoqing, Little Tiger Du, and the others. These guys followed him, and they brought disaster to the Monster Beast clan. He didn't know if they had a deeper breakthrough in Shenwu world. This dream is really too great, but just thinking about it makes me a little excited. Yu Chengyu's eyes lit up as she praised. He Jibai and Yu Chengliang looked at each other and smiled helplessly. But it couldn't be denied that Du Xiaofu's cooking skills were indeed unique. The most common monster beast meat was cooked by him, but the fragrance lingered in their mouths. Right, how much do you know about the dragons? Speaking of the dragons, Du Xiaofu couldn't help but think of Little Star. Her, the tomboy, Du Xiaoyao, and the others' whereabouts were unknown. If they could find the dragons and ask them to help find them, it would definitely be much faster. We haven't come into contact with the dragons' powerhouses. We only know that their main clan is in the 9 yellow sky, suppressing the mysterious sky. The clan's population isn't large, but every member of the dragons is a rare existence in the world. Their strength is terrifyingly strong, and normal clans wouldn't dare to provoke them. Speaking of business, He Jibai returned to his usual gentle and elegant appearance, and said seriously to Du Xiaofu, 9 yellow sky suppressing the mysterious sky. Du Xiaofu silently remembered this name, and thought to himself that he must find this place as soon as possible. Perhaps he could ask them to find the whereabouts of Little Star and the others. Right now, he didn't have any foundation in the 33 heavens, so he had to rely on external forces. Brother Du came from a small world, so I'm sure you're not too clear about the situation in the 33 heavens. In the entire 33 heavens, there are 3 strongest monster beast clans, and they are the dragons, the phoenixes, and the Qilins. These 3 clans were born after Pangu split open the heavens, and they have multiplied until now, and their strength is incomparably powerful. The ancestors of the first 3 clans were called the Ancestral Dragon, Primordial Phoenix, and Primordial Qilin, and they were all existences that looked down on the world. It can be said that in the entire 33 heavens, there weren't many powerful forces that could rival these 3. Only a few could be counted on one's fingers. In the eyes of those big clans, our Yu Qing Divine Kingdom can't be considered a strong opponent. Yu Chengliang also opened his mouth and said to Du Xiaofu. He was the 6th prince of the Yu Qing Divine Kingdom, but when he talked about the gap between them and the 3 clans, he showed the most objective judgment. He didn't look down on them because of his background. Ancestral Dragon, Primordial Phoenix, Primordial Qilin. Du Xiaofu nodded. In his heart, he thought that if he could find the Qilin clan, he should be able to ask them for help. After all, the Little Qilin was also a member of the Qilin clan. However, compared to Little Star's identity, the Little Qilin's weight should be much lighter. It must be known that Little Star was the daughter of the dragon god. Du Xiaofu didn't know the exact strength of the dragon god, but as the patriarch of the Azure Dragon clan, his status naturally didn't need to be mentioned. Dragons, Azure Dragon clan. These 2 should be the same clan. This thought suddenly flashed through Du Xiaofu's mind, but he didn't think too much about it. He only felt that there was no need to care too much about the issue of how they addressed each other. But in reality, What he didn't know was that the gap between the two was far too great. He didn't know how he would feel when he finally found out. The four of them gathered in front of the bonfire, eating and drinking to their heart's content, feeling extremely satisfied. While they were talking, Du Xiaofu's expression suddenly changed. He said, "These people really did find us. Their efficiency is quite high." Not long after he finished speaking, Yu Chengliang also raised his gaze and looked into the distance. He said, "Someone is coming. It should be Dai Xuanjin and the others. You guys enter the desolate ancient space first. I'll let you guys out after I've dealt with these troubles," and exited the divine desolate heavenlock formation. Du Xiaofu opened the desolate ancient space and stored the three of them inside. Then, he rose to his feet. Gently shaking the purple robe on his body, Du Xiaofu stood on the spot. He raised his gaze and looked at the void in front of him with a burning gaze. Waves of strange fluctuations were coming from there, which he keenly caught. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. In next to no time, numerous figures tore through the sky and swiftly arrived before him. They stood in midair and looked down at Du Xiaofu from above. All of these people emitted powerful auras, and every single one of them possessed imposing auras that shot into the sky like rainbows and were extremely formidable. The auras of a few tens of figures combined together, and it suffused a terrifying pressure that filled the air. It was only Du Xiaofu. If it was someone with a slightly weaker cultivation standing below him, that person would probably fall to the ground on the spot. "Kid, you're finally willing to make an appearance." Dai Xuanjin stepped out from the crowd, and he looked coldly at Du Xiaofu as he gritted his teeth and spoke. They'd waited here for over 10 days, yet they hadn't obtained anything. Today, this kid had finally made an appearance. Unfortunately, he hadn't waited for a few more days before asking Helian Shang to leave first. Otherwise, with the two of them joining forces, their chances of killing this kid would be much greater. "I'll make an appearance whenever I want. Could it be that I need to report to you?" Du Xiaofu looked at Dai Xuanjin as if he was looking at an idiot as he spoke unhurriedly. After spending so much time in the desolate ancient space, he'd comprehended the divine ability of absolute dominion, so it wasn't difficult for him to escape the restraints of the divine desolate heaven-lock formation. So at this moment, he seemed to be neither anxious nor impatient, and he was indescribably calm and composed. "Kid, don't try to win a battle of words here. You're dead for sure today." Dai Xuanjin pointed his finger at Du Xiaofu as he spoke word by word. At the same time, strong killing intent surged out from his body, and it swept out mightily as it charged towards Du Xiaofu. This killing intent shook the sky like numerous sharp blades, and it slashed open numerous enormous spatial rifts, causing it to be savage and terrifying. "You've said the same thing many times the last time, and I'm still standing here perfectly fine." Du Xiaofu looked at Dai Xuanjin mockingly. The tyrannical domain spread out and spread out in the sky, crushing all the killing intent. He said softly, "Moreover, those who have said such things to me have met with the same fate, including your second brother. It's just that I'm merciful and didn't take his life. Kid, I'll definitely make you pay for what you've done." Dai Xuanjin was unable to restrain his anger at the mention of his second brother, Dai Xianming. The three brothers were extremely talented and would become the cornerstones of the Great Void Divine General's residence in the future. However, this kid in front of him had caused his second brother to become a cripple, and they'd lost a powerful young expert. Even the Great Void Divine General's residence would feel heartache over such a loss. "You're indeed the three brothers. Dai Xuanzi and Dai Xuanming's style of speaking is exactly the same as yours." Du Xiaofu suddenly laughed and said to Dai Xuanjin, "However, there's something that I'm very puzzled about. I've asked your second brother about it, but he never gave me an answer. I can't help but itch to know the truth. I wonder if young Master Dai can clear up my doubts?" Dai Xuanjin looked at Du Xiaofu's expression and felt that the question he was going to ask would definitely not be anything good. Dai Xuanjin might dig a big hole for him. However, the curiosity that rose in his heart suppressed all his worries. At this moment, Dai Xuanjin only wanted to know what kind of question this kid would ask. Chapter 27:27. Boy, before you die, I'll allow you to ask your question. Daishuanjin's aura was not weak at all. He used his domineering words to express his great curiosity. The murderous aura that surged out of his body was also restrained. It's like this. Du Xiaofu paused for a moment and said thoughtfully, I've seen all three of you brothers, but the strange thing is that you all look very different. No matter how I look at it, you don't look like brothers. So I want to know, you all don't have the same father, right? As Du Xiaofu spoke, he put on an extremely serious look, as if he was really asking Daishuanjin for advice. However, the ridicule in his eyes could not be concealed. Originally, Daishuanjin also pricked up his ears, wanting to hear what kind of question the boy in front of him would ask. He was extremely curious. However, after listening to him, Daishuanjin was immediately enraged. Little bastard, you're courting death. Daishuanjin's face immediately darkened. Wisps of smoke rose from his forehead, and his expression became extremely gloomy. How dare he say such a thing? This little bastard really did not take the Great Void Divine General's mansion seriously at all. The faces of the dozens of people behind Daishuanjin twitched. Among them, a few people who were originally by Daishuanming's side were even more speechless. This was the second time they had heard the purple-robed young man say such a thing. He was simply too bold. If it were the outside world, even if he had 100 lives, he would not be enough for the experts of the Great Void Divine General's mansion to bid for him. Everyone could tell that the audacious boy was implying that the Great Void Divine General's wife had an affair outside, and the three sons they gave birth to were too different in appearance. They were not blood brothers at all. If the three brothers were not born from the same mother, then at least 2 of the 3 wives had an affair. Otherwise, the 3 brothers would not look so different. Du Xiaofu's words were so sarcastic that even Daishuanjin, who was in the perfection of the God-seizing realm, could not suppress the anger in his heart. Die, you little bastard! His figure dashed down with a boundless aura. It was as if he had covered the sky and the earth as he charged towards the purple-robed young man on the ground. The void suddenly trembled, and a terrifying wave of energy rippled out, turning into an all-pervasive shockwave that swept in all directions. When a burst of white light flashed, Du Xiaofu narrowed his eyes. Following that, the surrounding temperature plummeted, and an extreme cold swept through. In Daishuanjin's hand, an incomparably resplendent sword of ice appeared. It emitted a cold light as it slashed down at Du Xiaofu's head. Those who provoke me usually don't have a good ending. Today, you will be the first person I will kill since coming to the 33 heavens. Du Xiaofu's robes fluttered as he unleashed his absolute hegemony domain. Under the control of the law of space, waves of strange mysterious power rippled out within a radius of 15 meters. Invisible law power took shape, forming a marvelous trajectory that evolved into an obscure power. This situation caused Daishuanjin's gaze to tremble, and a strange feeling rose in his heart. With his cultivation, he could naturally sense that there was an unusual change around Du Xiaofu's body. However, his eyes and the power of his primordial spirit could not see through the mystery there. The purple-robed young man stood there motionlessly and did not show much of an extraordinary thing. Kill. Suppressing the feeling in his heart, Daishuanjin let out an earth-shaking roar. The ice sword in his hand glowed, and a crazy devouring power surged out. The surrounding spiritual qi involuntarily surged and rushed towards the light sword, increasing its power. Qila. The light sword slashed through the void, and in an instant, it arrived 10 meters in front of Du Xiaofu. An enormous force burst forth, and cracks spread out in the void, producing cracking sounds. Large expanses of space collapsed, and then collapsed into nothingness. However, it was this overbearing sword strike that suddenly stopped after it continued forward for another 5 feet. It was as if it had encountered an extremely great resistance. Chi. The sword light slashed through the absolute hegemony domain, advancing bit by bit. The sound of metal rubbing against each other could be heard, and it made one's teeth ache. The shock in Daishuanjin's heart was enormous. He had never imagined that the kid was just standing there, and his sword light could not even get close to him, let alone injure him. He could feel that his ice sword was like an ordinary sword that had slashed into a city wall, and it was difficult for it to advance even an inch. Moreover, as time continued to pass, the power on the light sword was also constantly being consumed. "Break!" Dai Xuanjin shouted, and the qi in his body began to surge violently, constantly entering the light sword in his hand, trying to directly break the domain outside Du Xiaofu's body. However, just as he was about to move, Du Xiaofu, who had been standing there without moving, suddenly moved as well. One of his feet suddenly stepped forward, and he took a bow step. His hands were wrapped in an intense purplish-gold light, and he reached forward and grabbed the light sword that was about to reach the center of the absolute hegemony domain. Swoosh! At this moment, Du Xiaofu's body was fluctuating with a blazing light, making him look like a god. The light sword was held in his hand just like that. His physical strength burst forth, and then he suddenly pulled. Dai Xuanjin's body was directly pulled, and he staggered, almost falling down. Just as his body was about to touch the domain outside Du Xiaofu's body, Dai Xuanjin sensed a dangerous aura, and he decisively let go, abandoning the light sword in his hand. Then, his body abruptly stopped outside, and he did not step in even an inch. He instinctively felt that the front was filled with a power that made his heart palpitate. Humph! Du Xiaofu snorted coldly, and he secretly felt that it was a pity. His original intention was to pull the other party into the absolute hegemony domain. In the limited space outside his body, freedom would occupy the absolute initiative, and it would be much easier to kill Dai Xuanjin than to fight him head-on. However, it was obvious that the other party was also very cautious and did not take the bait so easily. How is this possible? After Dai Xuanjin stabilized his body, he suddenly retreated until he was dozens of feet away from Du Xiaofu, and he stopped and looked at him in shock. At this moment, not only was he amazed by the space domain outside the purple-robed young man, but he was also particularly shocked by the terrifying physical body. As a cultivator who had grasped the complete laws of water, Dai Xuanjin knew very well just how terrifying the power of the Sword of Light he had just unleashed was. That peerlessly sharp aura was something that even an ordinary truth-severing stage cultivator would not dare to easily take on with his body, let alone a god-seizing stage cultivator. However, that kid just now did just that. He only used his hands to hold his own light sword. Although the power of the light sword had been weakened by a lot at that time, it definitely still had an extremely sharp edge. If an ordinary person were to come into contact with it with their body, they would definitely be at a disadvantage. However, that kid seemed to be completely fine. Just how freakishly strong must his physical body be to be able to do that? I don't have time to waste on you. Let's end this quickly. Du Xiaofu's palm shook, and the light sword in his hand was crushed into powder, turning into the purest energy that drifted into the void. Then, he took a step forward, and his body shot out, flying directly into the sky to stand opposite Dai Xuanjin. Heavenly thunder punishment. These words came out of Du Xiaofu's mouth, and then he gently waved his hand. Boom! Suddenly, there was a huge tremor in the sky, and there was a terrifying sound of thunder that caused the entire world to tremble. An extremely thick thunderbolt came down from the sky swiftly and violently, like the roar of the heavens and like a divine punishment. The space was directly shaken apart, and it looked like a huge city wall that had suddenly received a violent impact. Large pieces of boulders burst out, piercing through everything. That terrifying thunderbolt was like a pillar that reached the sky, and it came down from the sky at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, it was above Dai Xuanjin's head. Backlight Frost Dragon, break for me. Dai Xuanjin did not even think about it, and such a loud shout burst out from his throat. Boundless energy surged out from his body like a surging river, creating a majestic wave that rushed straight into the sky. Roar! A deafening dragon's roar came out of nowhere, and the light around Dai Xuanjin's body quickly combined and changed, condensing into a huge frost dragon. Just from its size alone, it was not the slightest bit weaker than Du Xiaofu's thunderbolt light. The muscles on the dragon's body were perfectly round, as if they carried unparalleled power. Every dragon scale was clearly visible, and it was ferocious and domineering. Such a huge dragon had an immeasurable dragon body. As its huge tail swayed, the space was crushed to the point that a large area was shattered, revealing pitch-black marks. As soon as the frost dragon appeared, it immediately shook its body and soared into the sky. Amidst a terrifying roar, it charged fiercely towards the terrifying thunderbolt light. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The space was filled with powerful fluctuations, and an invisible force rushed in all directions, causing all of Dai Xuanjin's subordinates to retreat rapidly and hide far away. No one dared to stay near the battlefield. Both of them are so powerful. This is too terrifying. Their cultivation is at the consummate level of the seizing divinity stage, and they are only one step away from the severing truth stage. This will definitely be a fierce battle. That purple-robed young man's methods seem to be stronger than young Master Dai's. I wonder who will have the upper hand this time. I hope young Master Dai can stabilize the situation. I've already sent out the news, and it won't be long before the others arrive here. When that time comes, that kid will have nowhere to run. That's right. As long as he can stabilize him and wait for Helian Shang and the others to arrive, that guy will definitely die. Everyone looked at the situation over there and exclaimed in shock. At the same time, they were also shocked by Du Xiaofu's methods. He was definitely an extremely terrifying expert, far from someone they could deal with. Even Zhong Su, Wang Qishuan, and the other seizing divinity stage cultivators were unable to participate in this battle. They were a little worried for Dai Xuanjin because when he fought with the purple-robed young man a few days ago, he was clearly at a disadvantage. Although this disadvantage was not great, sometimes when experts fought, whether or not they could survive in the end depended on such a small gap. However, everyone was not too worried. Someone had already spread the news about the situation here. As long as the other seizing divinity stage cultivators arrived, that kid would only have a dead end no matter what. However, the only thing they had to worry about was his spatial treasure. If he hid in it again, this time it would be like drawing water with a bamboo basket. Chi chi chi, roar. Under everyone's gaze, the lightning beam unleashed by Du Xiaofu brazenly collided with Dai Xuanjin's ice dragon. Both of them were extremely domineering forces. As soon as they collided, a terrifying sound erupted, causing the entire world to tremble and shake violently uncontrollably. It was under such a collision that the resplendent pillar of lightning and the long dragon of cold light shattered piece by piece. They scattered in the air and turned into an apocalyptic storm of energy that swept out like a tsunami. The surrounding mountains were instantly reduced to powder, and all the trees disappeared in the blink of an eye. A flat area appeared within 100 miles, and endless smoke and dust danced in all directions. Du Xiaofu and Dai Xuanjin's figures were simultaneously engulfed by the energy storm and disappeared. As far as the eye could see, there were countless energy runes dancing up and down in all directions. At the center of the battlefield, a huge black hole appeared, like the huge mouth of a demon king, with dense fangs that swallowed everything. Huff, huff, huff. The energy storm did not dissipate for a long time, and it kept drilling into the black hole in the void, forming an extremely terrifying vortex that began to devour everything around it. Oh no! Retreat! In the distance, Zhong Su, Wang Qishuan, and their many subordinates all cried out and began to flee for their lives. They had already hidden far enough, but at this moment, under the influence of the energy vortex, everyone felt a huge suction force surging over, pulling them in the direction of the black hole. They could feel that there was a power that could destroy everything inside. With the cultivation of everyone present, if they came into contact with it, their lives would be in danger. The battle between two experts at the peak of the God-seizing realm is actually so terrifying. Everyone's legs were trembling as they retreated again and again. Fortunately, they had the method to pass through the divine barren heavenlock formation, so they were not worried that there was no way out. Their gazes never left the battlefield, and they all stared without blinking, hoping to be able to see the result of the battle as soon as possible. As time slowly passed, the energy runes that were enshrouding the void finally dissipated, completely devoured by the huge vortex, and finally disappeared at the same time. Then, the figures of Dai Xuanjin and the purple-robed young man appeared before everyone's eyes. At this moment, the two of them looked somewhat miserable. Under the impact of the domineering energy, the robes on their bodies had been torn apart. However, the purple-robed young man had a layer of green armor shining on his body, and he was completely unharmed. "You're no match for me." Du Xiaofu and Dai Xuanjun stood opposite each other as he spoke softly. With a thought, the azure spirit armor on his body disappeared. Then, he took out a purple robe from his cosmos bag and put it on. Puffed. Opposite him, Dai Xuanjun was just about to open his mouth to speak, but he spat out an arrow of blood from his mouth, piercing through the void and creating a black hole. As the blood gushed out of his mouth, his complexion instantly paled by 2 shades. The two of them exchanged blows with all their strength, and the result was obvious. He was absolutely at a disadvantage. Du Xiaofu's attack did not really land on his body, but the terrifying energy storm still caused him to suffer quite a bit of damage. The attack between the two of them was more like a confrontation of the power of laws. "I admit that your physical body is indeed very strong, but if you want to kill me, you definitely won't be able to do it." Dai Xuanjun raised his sleeve and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth as he spoke with a cold gaze. He could naturally see the gap between the two of them. Although they were both at the perfect stage of the seizing divinity stage, the kid opposite him clearly had many more tricks up his sleeve. However, Dai Xuanjun was not afraid. He still had a trump card that he had not used. However, he did not want to use his strongest trump card unless it was a critical moment. "Whether I can kill you or not, let's try again." Du Xiaofu snorted coldly as he took a step forward and suddenly stood still. He raised his hands and began to draw in the void. Strange hand seals formed one after another, condensing a strange and inexplicable charm that spread out. Buzz. As his hand seals condensed, a strange majesty suddenly rose in the space and brazenly suppressed Dai Xuanjun's soul, causing his heart to palpitate. Chi. Du Xiaofu's hand seals continued to condense. They were complicated and obscure, carrying with them a vast and profound rhythm. Mysterious rays of light floated out from his body and shuttled back and forth outside his body. Boom! Suddenly, a ray of light rushed out from Du Xiaofu's body and rose into the sky, occupying the position above his head. Chi! Immediately afterwards, another ray of light rushed out and arrived at his feet, stopping there motionlessly. These 2 balls of light, one above and one below, instantly separated. With a swoosh, the light above Du Xiaofu's head dispersed, and a huge 8 trigrams diagram appeared. It was like a divine disk that slowly rotated and occupied the void. And beneath his feet, a blazing flame rose and burned fiercely, releasing a terrifying high temperature. However, all of this seemed to be just the beginning, and it was far from over. Under Dai Xuanjun's shocked gaze, the purple-robed youth's body continued to change, causing his primordial spirit to tremble and his eyes to fiercely twitch. At this moment, fear finally rose in his heart. Chapter 27-28. Dai Xuanjun's eyes were filled with shock as a thunderclap suddenly resounded by his ears. After that, he saw a dazzling bolt of lightning surge out from the violet-robed young man's body. It was like an enormous net that went against the heavens and merged with the 8 trigrams above his head. Both of them emanated vast might. 2 types of similarly blazing lights shone upon each other, releasing an extremely dense pressure that caused one's heart to tremble, and even space rumbled without end along with it. The fusion of several laws. How is this possible? Dai Xuanjun muttered. He was deeply shocked by Du Xiaofu's ability and found it extremely hard to believe. He was naturally able to sense that the laws of lightning and the laws of fire were perfectly fused together in the technique executed by the violet-robed young man. This wasn't an illusion, but a true combination of 2 laws. It wasn't that no one could accomplish such a feat, there were even numerous people in the 33 heavens who could accomplish such a feat. However, when all of this was executed by a seizing god cultivator, the concept was completely different. Hum. Dai Xuanjun's shock didn't end there because the changes to Du Xiaofu's body didn't stop there. Accompanied by a buzzing sound that caused one's ears to go blank, The space around the violet-robed young man directly began to distort. It looked like a ball of water that had been bound, and Du Xiaofu held it in his hand and allowed him to pinch and flatten it. However, the space stabilized in next to no time. At a glance, it didn't seem any different. He's added the laws of space. How did he accomplish such a feat? Dai Xuanjin was extremely shocked. If the violet-robed young man's ability was executed by a Sever Truth expert, he would absolutely not be as shocked as he was right now. Unlike Dai Xuanjin's emotional state, Du Xiaofu seemed rather calm at this moment. He was immersed in an indescribable state. The Void 8 trigrams was comprehended from the space of the divine domain. It was a powerful technique left behind by the master of the 3,000 worlds, and it possessed unfathomable abilities. For example, Du Xiaofu's strength had grown too much over the years. However, as his cultivation continued to increase, he increasingly felt that it contained an extremely vast truth of the great Tao and the truth of the world. In the beginning, the Void 8 trigrams could only evolve heavenly lightning, earth fire, mountains, rivers, and lakes. However, it didn't have a physical form. It was merely a manifestation of energy. Gradually, he was able to fuse the thunder martial vein with it and increase its power. Today, Du Xiaofu, who had grasped the truth of the laws, could already combine several laws and use them through the Void 8 trigrams. Of course, he didn't know how powerful he would be under such circumstances. Regarding this, he had an extremely strong expectation in his heart. Hum. Along with the magical fluctuations, Du Xiaofu's surroundings continued to change. High in the sky, the 8 trigrams combined with the thunder martial vein. Below, mountains and rivers evolved, and earth fire rose. It was as if it was real. However, he could clearly feel that the blazing earth fire was something that truly existed, and it possessed an indescribably ferocious power. At the same time, the space around him didn't look any different, but it was extremely different from usual. Under the influence of the absolute hegemony domain, it had become a forbidden area. That kid is too evil. I'm afraid young Master Dai is in trouble this time. In the distant crowd, Wang Qishuan said solemnly after recovering from his shock. I hope young Master Dai can hold him back. It shouldn't be long before experts arrive here. With the help of the divine desolate heaven-lock formation, no matter how strong he is, he definitely won't be able to survive. Zhong Su also frowned as he continued Wang Qishuan's words. Others might not be able to tell, but as experts of the God-seizing realm, even though they were standing far away, they could still sense the terrifying aura contained within the 8 trigrams. However, with the strength of the two of them, they were unable to do anything to help. They could only stand anxiously in the distance, and both of them broke out in cold sweat for Dai Xuanjin. Young Master Dai, if you have any other tricks up your sleeve, hurry up and use them. Otherwise, I'm afraid you won't have another chance. Du Xiaofu's voice was loud and clear, and it resounded in this space. Under the contrast of the huge 8 trigrams pattern, he was like a deity that had descended from the heavens, overbearing and extraordinary. His robes fluttered in the wind, but his entire person looked as if he had merged with nature, and he had endless majesty and charm. At this moment, Du Xiaofu felt as if his body was being supported by an indescribable power. He had the strength to dominate the heavens and destroy the earth, and he could look down on everything. At this moment, he felt a strength he had never felt before. Even if he was facing Dai Xuanjin, who was at the same cultivation realm as him, he was actually fully confident that he could directly crush Dai Xuanjin. Kid, don't be arrogant. I told you that it would absolutely not be so easy for you to kill me. Dai Xuanjin spoke coldly when facing Du Xiaofu's contempt, and his expression was extremely unsightly. No matter how unwilling he was to admit it, he couldn't help but feel deep fear towards the violet-robed young man in the depths of his heart. As he watched Du Xiaofu's imposing aura gradually rise, Dai Xuanjin didn't hesitate at all, and his black robes fluttered violently. After that, a wave of unusual aura swept out swiftly and swept swiftly through space. Gurgle, gurgle. The sound of water surging resounded. It wasn't loud, yet it entered clearly into the ears of everyone here. After that, A crystalline glow suddenly flickered beneath Dai Xuanzhen's feet, and then a large river suddenly appeared. It rumbled as it flowed, and it carried surging waves as it charged into the nine heavens. On the other hand, Dai Xuanzhen stepped on it like a god that carried the might of the heavens. Kill! A soft shout came from Dai Xuanzhen's mouth. Before Du Xiaofu could make a move, he took the initiative to launch a swift and fierce attack at him. A huge river rose into the air, and the head of the tide hung high in the nine heavens. It was like an azure dragon raising its head and roaring ferociously. Its ferocious fangs were suffused with an awe-inspiring cold light as it bit towards Du Xiaofu. "How dare you use such a petty trick to embarrass yourself?" These words were uttered from Du Xiaofu's mouth. His expression did not change in the face of the huge river dragon that was pouncing towards him. However, his hand seal quietly changed. Whoosh! 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 The 8 trigrams in the void above his head swelled in the wind and rapidly expanded. It brazenly pressed down and enveloped Dai Xuanzhen, who was opposite him. At the same time, a deafening shout tore through the void and spread in all directions. Heaven above and earth below. Heavenly thunder, absolute destruction. Under the 8 trigrams, heavenly thunder rumbled. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Dazzling runes interweaved into a huge lightning net that traversed the universe. The supreme yang energy swept out and directly suppressed the huge river dragon. After a rumble, a terrifying bolt of lightning suddenly rushed out from the 8 trigrams in the void. It was even more dazzling than the scorching sun in the sky. This bolt of lightning carried with it an aura that could destroy heaven and earth, and it brazenly blasted towards Dai Xuanzhen's head. Break! Dai Xuanzhen let out a long roar. His feet stepped on the stars, and his arms waved in the void. Under his control, the water dragon moved in response to the momentum. The dragon's body that carried with it an explosive power twisted, and its huge tail lashed out, fiercely whipping towards Du Xiaofu's bolt of lightning. The supreme power suddenly collided, and violent waves of energy swept up huge waves that filled the sky and spread in all directions. The entire world shook. The light of the lightning and the river dragon exploded at the same time, and finally dissipated into the void. Dai Xuanzhen was sent flying by the huge shock, and a stream of blood spurted out from his mouth. However, during this process, Du Xiaofu quickly chased after him, and at the same time, his hand seals were constantly changing. An invisible power rippled, and with him as the center, the 8 trigrams in the void continued to spread out. The 8 trigrams were evolving, changing, and deriving. Heaven above and earth below. Earth fire bright destruction. As Du Xiaofu's hand seals changed, rolling flames quickly rose from under his feet like a sea of fire, intertwining, entangling, and fusing with the light of the lightning, converging into an even more powerful attack. The flames spread, and the fire spread, wrapped in a blazing heat wave, and burned directly to Dai Xuanzhen's feet. "You want to kill me? It's not that easy." Dai Xuanzhen's eyes narrowed, and at the critical moment, a white mist gushed out from his body, tightly enveloping his body. Then, the mist changed, and directly covered the surface of his body, turning into a shining armor, firmly protecting him within it. When he finished doing all this, the fire that Du Xiaofu had created with the law of fire climbed onto his body and began to burn fiercely. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Under the burning of the blazing flames, the armor on Dai Xuanzhen's body made an ear-piercing sound, like water droplets splashing into a pot of boiling oil. The ice armor quickly melted, and once again turned into thick clouds of mist, which also extinguished most of the raging flames, and no longer had much destructive power. Such a scene made Dai Xuanzhen unable to help but breathe a sigh of relief. He was really frightened by the pressure emanating from Du Xiaofu's body earlier, and deeply felt that it was very difficult for him to be a match for his strength. However, now, it seemed that the other party was a little more bark than bite, and the attack launched by the other party was something that he could resist with all his strength. "You're just for show, nothing more. If that's all you've got, then the one who will die today will definitely be you." Dai Xuanzhen's eyes were cold as he looked at Du Xiaofu, and said gloomily, He knew in his heart that the news had already been spread, and as long as the strong reinforcements arrived, everything would turn for the better. Just for show? Since you think so, then I'll make you accept your defeat wholeheartedly. Du Xiaofu snorted as he stepped into the void. Under the cover of the 8 trigrams in the void, the heavenly lightning, earthly fire, mountains, rivers, and lakes all moved with him. The seals in his hand were constantly formed, complex and changing, containing profound mysteries and emitting a vast charm that made the world tremble. Rumble, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Within the 8 trigrams, thunder was vast and mighty, shaking the void, and raging flames were torrential, burning the sky. In addition, there were also mountains moving horizontally, shaking the sky, and rivers roaring, turbid waves surging into the sky. Various scenes were fluctuating, and Du Xiaofu's body was wrapped in them. Rays of light circulated, fluctuating with blazing power. Kill. Du Xiaofu let out a roar that shattered the void. Walala. As soon as he finished speaking, the 8 trigrams diagram began to spin rapidly. Bolts of lightning poured out, and at the same time, terrifying flames spread out. The 2 types of powerful laws intertwined and fused into one, and they swept towards Dai Xuanjun. Facing such a terrifying attack, Dai Xuanjun's expression changed several times, as if he was making a difficult choice. However, in the end, his gaze became firm, and there was also a hint of heartache. Kid, I'll let you see what true strength is, Dai Xuanjun said gloomily as he watched Du Xiaofu's movements. He was not slow either, and he moved quickly. He suddenly opened his hands, and a ball of black light flew out from each of his palms, emitting a whistling sound that made one's soul tremble. It was as if a malicious spirit had come out, and the aura of a fiend god rolled out. The weak water of the Nether River devours all things. Kill, Dai Xuanjun shouted sternly, and the black light in his hands became even darker and deeper. He stretched out his hands in front of him, and a thin stream of light poured out from the 2 balls of black light at the same time, flying in the void. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Once these 2 slender streams of light appeared, they did not cause too much of a commotion. However, one could see with the naked eye that 2 pitch-black marks were being corroded in the space. Under Dai Xuanjun's control, the 2 slender streams of light began to intertwine and spin. They intertwined in a spiral and merged into one. Then, they rapidly grew in size, like a long black river that extended out in the void. Elwo! An ear-piercing howl was heard. It was like a dragon's roar, but it did not have the domineering aura of a dragon's roar. Instead, it possessed endless viciousness and filth. Accompanied by such a sound, the black light that surged out immediately turned into a huge snake that flickered with a dim light. Waves of black mist were spat out from the snake's mouth, and space was silently eroded. Is this your trump card? Such a scene caused Du Xiaofu's eyes to tremble. He could clearly feel that the black snake was incomparably terrifying. It was like a creature of the netherworld, carrying with it the power of extreme and evil. It was as if it could split apart all existences in this world. It was terrifying and intimidating. However, he did not feel much fear because of this. He continued to control the sea of lightning and fire, brazenly suppressing it. This is the weak water of the Nether River, taken from the netherworld. Even my great void divine general's estate does not have many. To be able to die under such a treasure, you should be proud, Dai Xuanjun said coldly, waving his hand. Little bastard. Now you should pay the price for everything you've done. Elwo. The huge black snake hissed and pounced towards Du Xiaofu. The evil aura fluctuated, and without dodging, it directly charged into Du Xiaofu's sea of lightning and fire. These 2, one was domineering and fierce, the other was vicious and evil. After the initial contact, they blended together and rapidly began to consume each other violently. The power of thunder and lightning brazenly struck, and the power of the raging flames burned fiercely. The giant snake roared, and the snake's tail moved, stirring up the sea of lightning and fire. Elwo! The black snake kept hissing, and the sound pierced through metal and stone, piercing one's eardrums. Its body not only carried an evil aura that corroded everything, but also had a power that shook the world. It kept rolling in the sea of lightning and fire. The domineering and blazing energy in the field was rapidly consumed. Soon, the endless sea of lightning and fire was swallowed up and disappeared. However, the body of the giant black snake was only half destroyed, and it still continued to charge towards Du Xiaofu. What a terrifying corrosive power! Du Xiaofu's eyes flickered, and his heart palpitated. He had attacked with all his strength, using the power of the fusion of two laws, but he hadn't caused much damage to the black snake. This made him feel inconceivable. It had to be known that this was the power of laws, and it wasn't weak. Any ordinary seizing Divinity Realm master who came into contact with it would absolutely lose a layer of skin. However, the black snake formed from Daishuanjin's Nether River's weak water actually retained most of its power. Du Xiaofu couldn't help but feel very dignified. He seemed to have underestimated this opponent. He didn't know if the Nether River's water was as the other party had said. It came from the yellow springs of the Netherworld, and was this world's mosting object. If that was the case, then dealing with it today would be very troublesome. In the legends of the world, the yellow springs of the Netherworld existed in the 6 paths of reincarnation. It was the world's most mysterious existence. Not to mention Du Xiaofu, even an existence like the Skywood Divine Tree's old ancestor, didn't know much about it. Who would have thought that Daishuanjin would be able to take out such a treasure? It was truly shocking. Extreme yin and extreme yang, mutually reinforcing and restraining each other. Since it's an object from the Netherworld, then I'll use the most overbearing method to deal with it. Du Xiaofu thought about how to deal with it, but at the same time, his movements didn't stop. Under the 8 trigrams diagram, the violet-robed young man's hand seals were constantly condensing, but he wasn't in a hurry to attack. Instead, he was brewing an invisible force, and he allowed the black snake to charge to his side. Such a distance had already completely entered the range of Du Xiaofu's spatial domain. Absolute domineering domain. Suppress. Du Xiaofu shouted coldly. He didn't even think about it before the spatial laws moved brazenly. The invisible power of the laws ferociously attacked, and it fiercely pressed down on the black snake. Roar. A mighty force burst out and pressed down, pressing down on the black snake to the point it howled. It was as if it had fallen into a sticky quagmire, and its speed dropped sharply. The snake struggled with all its might, and it pressed down on the space around Du Xiaofu to the point it constantly warped and deformed. Oomph! The power of the spatial laws can't stop me. Daishuanjin snorted coldly. His body suddenly shook, and a powerful aura burst out. Under the guidance of his aura, waves of black gas rippled out from the black snake's body, corroding the space inch by inch and emitting a sizzling sound. Then, the black snake seemed to have suddenly broken free from a huge shackle and obtained a certain amount of freedom. Its speed increased explosively again, and it twisted its body to pounce. Du Xiaofu's spatial domain could no longer trap it.